In the impeccably clean interior of a brand new camper, a man suddenly finds himself in the company of an amazing fluffy white owl. He fixates his gaze on the window, eyes wide open in shock. Sweat streams down his face as he tries to comprehend the unthinkable vision before him. Just outside the vehicle, a gigantic, multi-headed beast roars furiously with rage in so many eyes, and its massive claws tear the ground as it rushes with fierce devastation across the plains. Only 24 hours before, life was much more mundane. Everything boiled down to a simple deal in the city. Tsurezure stood beaming with pride as the professional dealer officially handed him the keys to his luxurious new mobile home, congratulating him on such an important purchase. He sincerely thanked her and admitted that owning such a camper had long been his dream. After that, she gave him a small token of appreciation, a universal selfie stick. He examined the device and realized it could also conveniently be used as a sturdy tripod, a useful addition for any traveler. The woman explained that documenting one's own journey had become customary for camping enthusiasts, emphasizing that content from solo trips and picturesque locations was in high demand. She advised him to use this to record his future adventures. In his enthusiasm, he immediately suggested putting the new tripod to use to take a memorable photo together in front of the van. She looked surprised by the unexpected proposal, but he insisted it would be a great way to mark the occasion. He proudly stands next to his new purchase, a dazzling white travel van that obscures both him and the professional woman who helped close the deal. With a wide-open smile, he turns back to the dealer, shows her the photo of the moment on his phone, which elicits a polite bow and a word of thanks from her as they finish the handover. As soon as he settles into the driver's seat, his face lights up with pure delight. He grips the steering wheel for the first time. A decisive turn of the ignition and the engine roars at full volume, sending a wave of vibration through his entire body. The heavy vehicle soon drives away from the showroom. Its massive frame smoothly glides onto the road as he begins his journey. His preparation for the road ahead is thorough. He stops at an open-air specialty store to gather everything necessary. He comes out with bags in his hands and his gaze repeatedly drifts back to the impressive van parked nearby. The journey continues. The refurbished bus speeds along the highway, its long silhouette sharply outlined against the landscape. Eventually, he reaches Tsurezure Auto Campground, a picturesque resort town in the mountains, where he finds a spot among other campers and settles in for the evening. Resting in place, he takes a call from his stunned friend who cannot believe the scale of the purchase. He explains that it is a minibus with a conversion, the largest possible size allowed by the standard license, and despite the crazy 20 million yen price, he couldn't be happier with his new mobile home. He recalls the exhausting years spent as a corporate slave, a toxic atmosphere where harassment and relentless demands persisted. During that hellish time, he worked like draft cattle, but there was one ray of hope: too busy to spend what he earned, so savings quietly accumulated. After 10 years of living on the bare minimum and carefully investing every honestly earned penny, Tsurezure finally reached the moment when he could change his life. Sitting in his modest apartment, he admits, although he is alone, this huge camper is a hard-won reward for those years of sacrifice and saving. With a new goal, he reaches out to an old friend. There is so much joy in his voice that he suggests they recreate the camp trips like in their youth. He recalls how easy and fun it was to travel together in the seniors' camper and speaks of a passionate desire to return to those carefree moments. However, the answer from the other end of the line is a sober reminder of the passage of time. His friend says that now they are all adults. Many are already married and raising children, so simply dropping everything and rushing into an adventure like in their student years is no longer possible. Despite this, Tsurezure paints a vivid picture of the unique freedom that a camper provides. You can cook and relax inside it even in any weather. He insists that the journey itself, conversations, laughter, and up until the moment they reach their destination, will become a long-awaited escape from the monotony of their daily life. He goes even further to sweeten the deal, promises to take on all logistics and equipment and even invite their families. While he carefully cleans the appearance of his new car, he waits for his friend to at least agree to voice this idea to their old outdoor group. The conversation suddenly takes on a lighter tone. His friend jokingly asks if his eyes are crossing from exhaustion because he can't believe he really bought such an expensive car. He laughs loudly, confirms the purchase, and proudly declares that he has finally quit the job that had kept him in the chains of exhausting slavery for so long. When plans for their next day off are already agreed upon, he hangs up the receiver and, approaching his pride, lets out a genuine, sincere smile of satisfaction. He can't wait to show off his favorite camper and finally set off on the journey he has worked for 10 years. He finally arrived at the destination. The camper van is calmly standing against the backdrop of balanced mountains and still lakes. Having entered inside, He surveys the impeccable interior of his new house on wheels, the fruit of a decade of sacrifices. The man lets out a long, tired sigh of relief. His eyes close because the burden of years of corporate servitude is finally lifting from his shoulders. He cannot contain his excitement. He waves his fist in the air and remembers how his exhausting work was finally not in vain. He lies on his back and realizes, earning money is important, but life without joy is like being buried in a pit. He decides to spend the night alone and meet friends tomorrow, even dreaming of the day when he will share this path with a partner or his own family. Suddenly, a dazzling white light flashes. It burns the space, and in a moment erases that calm atmosphere. Suddenly, he jumps to his feet. A panic cry about being late bursts out of him before he can remember. He is on a well-deserved vacation. Falling back onto the pillows, he laments how deeply ingrained the habits of corporate life are in his soul, but still decides, for the rest of the day he will allow himself to be lazy. The silence is shattered by a sudden realization or sound, and he panics, jumping out of the van, rushing with frantic bustle. He runs around the car ahead, and his eyes widen sharply with a desperate impression at what he sees. The man freezes, unable to exhale, his gaze glued to the impossible spectacle, his pupils dilated from shock, pure and unadulterated. He jumped out of the van and immediately realized he was in a completely foreign landscape. Instead of the lakeside campsite he remembered, he was met by sharp, gigantic mountain peaks. He looked around, searching throughout the day, and he no longer understood where the lake had gone. Was sure he had parked at the auto campground. Panic set in as soon as he realized he had no memory of how he got to this empty, rocky landscape. He desperately searched for answers, but looking at the phone he realized there was no signal. He quickly returned to the van and grabbed the car's navigation system, hoping it would still work even where the connection was very weak. He frantically swiped the screen, begging it to show where he was. Instead of the map, the display flickered and came to life, showing a strange control system. He had 10 points and was currently at level 1. There hung a list of impossible possibilities, from automatic repairs to vehicle storage, up to the water supply system. He froze in front of the screen, and his confusion only grew as he tried to figure out the points and levels mentioned there. It was not what he saw in the manual. All he needed was a simple map to get him home. A sudden, brutal blow jerked the van. A heavy object slammed against the roof, and the sound, echoing in the cramped cabin, rolled like an echo. Awkwardly holding his breath, he crouched down to the windshield, and his heart pounded as he had no idea what exactly could have fallen from the sky. He lowers his gaze to the small white creature writhing on the ground, wings wildly beating against the dirt. He looks closer and notices a foreign object deeply embedded in its feathers, causing the animal such obvious suffering. While he recalls the warning, predatory birds are dangerous and unpredictable, the species of a crippled animal prevails over caution, and he decides that he cannot just leave and let it die. He moves with careful precision, pressing the fluffy bird to his chest and quickly pulling out the cause of its torment, a primitive wooden arrow. When he removes the projectile, the creature lets out a sharp, painful cry but barely twitches in his hands. Thanks to his foresight in packing a first aid kit in the van, he applies a clean bandage to the wound. He speaks softly to the little bird, and with a smile notes that such simple treatment has already made her much more comfortable. The bird suddenly rises into the sky, but instead of fleeing into the thicket, it flies around and confidently perches on his shoulder, its claws gently gripping the vest. He continues walking his path through the tall grass, amused by how the creature seems attached to him. He thinks, people say owls never get attached to humans, but this one seems to show genuine gratitude for his help. A sharp rustle in the dense thicket stops him in his tracks. An arrow means an archer. He calls out a weary greeting into the darkness, orders the owl to stay close behind him safely, and tries to find out where the noise came from. His heavy hammers strike the ribs as two ugly green-skinned monsters burst out of the bushes like a whirlwind. They hold crude stone knives and show their jagged teeth, neigh with a hoarse, guttural roar that suddenly grips him with fear. They rush forward, growling with a hoarse, beastly hiss, and their torn teeth are bared in a predatory display. Tsurezure recoils in fear. He tightly presses the small white owl to himself and, stammering, desperately dives back to slip out of reach of the primitive attackers. Only instinct governs. He jerks the remote in his hand and presses the unlock button. A dull mechanical hum. The door of a white camper nearby opens, clearing the way and offering an instant metallic refuge from what is already approaching. The heavy machine roars, bursts from the spot, and lunges forward, scattering a dust cloud as it tears away from the clearing. Behind it, two green-skinned creatures remain standing in the mud, rough weapons raised in helpless ragged. Their prey is already fleeing into the distance. In the cabin safe, he collapses into the driver's seat, his heart pounding wildly against his ribs. He stares wide-eyed at the monitor where the figures of monsters are fleeing, and his mind races with panicked questions. Are these aliens from other worlds, underground dwellers, or some mythical creatures like the Kappa? The camper continues to speed backward wildly. The engine's roar drowns out the sounds of the forest. At the edge of the thicket, primitive hunters watch as the strange moving metal box disappears from view, and one of them still grips the bow that proved useless against this speed. He grips the steering wheel with trembling hands, his eyes flickering between the road ahead and the image in the rearview mirror. When the monsters finally vanish from the screen, a new wave of fear washes over him. He has not the slightest idea what this unmarked wilderness is or how he ended up here at all. The white van cuts through the uneven forest path. The wheels crunch over dry leaves and twigs. Under the dense canopy, light dimly filters through the foliage, and long, ever-changing shadows glide over the vehicle as it drives deeper into the unknown. It is clear he is shaking, but he keeps a steady pace, his forehead covered in cold sweat. Nearby, the white owl sits just as calmly, its large eyes intently watching the man who just saved them both from certain cruel death. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his breath caught as the forest ahead exploded in a cacophony of cracking wood splintering under the blows. Sweat streamed down his face in rivulets, and he froze in fear, not knowing which new nightmare beast would soon emerge from the shadows. The trees cracked like dry twigsand. That sound meant something large was already approaching right to his spot. Suddenly, a figure flew down from the canopy overhead, a continuous movement against the backdrop of falling leaves. The warrior descended with a drawn blade and landed lightly near the roof of the vehicle, as if holding the same anxiety in her mind that had stirred above. She was an elf. Her pointed ears twitched as she scanned the area with wide, focused eyes. Her face mixed stern determination and sudden shock as soon as she saw the mechanical monstrosity beneath her. A strange object she clearly did not expect to find amid this turmoil. When she landed, the young man in the van could only freeze in shocked silence. The ground trembled, and the forest belt bowed under the weight of something much larger than a single warrior, and this confirmed his worst fears about the source of the destruction. With a deafening roar that shook the very thickness of the air, a gigantic many-winged beast burst through the thickets. It loomed over the elf and the strange metal carriage. Its jaws were open wide to show rows of bristling fangs and a torn tongue ready to crush everything in its path. Instantly reacting, the elf began drawing a swirling vortex of energy between her palms, her face frozen in a mask of concentration. In the van, the driver screamed in pure terror, his head buzzing from the incredible scale of the monster that appeared right before him, and choking, he cried out in a desperate plea for salvation. She unleashed gathered force, a dagger-like lightning bolt of light that pierced the air with a sharp whistle. The projectiles hit without missing, one of them deeply embedded in one of the creature's many eyes, and at the moment of impact the monster's head jerked back, splattering dark ichor. The beast jerked back, and a hoarse howl of pain burst from its throat as it clenched its bloodied face. Seizing the moment, the warrior woman firmly landed on the ground, her hand gripping the sword hilt tighter as she prepared for the next phase of the fight, her gaze never leaving her enormous enemy for a second. She tears forward with lethal precision, the blade plunges deep into the monster's eye. Tsurezure freezes in shock inside the safe van cabin as the beast roars in pain, and the dark core of the eye gushes from the wound. A mighty creature loses strength and with a deafening, stunning blow crashes into the ground, raising a wall of dust and debris several feet from the machine. Standing triumphantly on the summit of fallen Titan, the warrior looks back, her face reveals nothing. In the van, Tsurezure clenches his teeth, trying to make sense of what he has seen. His head spins from how terrifyingly real this encounter looks. He still firmly holds the steering wheel. Next to him, a calm little white owl sits silently listening as they look through the settling dust. Suddenly she breaks into a sprint towards the van, and her voice cuts through the silence as she orders him not to move. Tsurezure flinches, and his heart pounds wildly from her sudden, aggressive approach. Approaching the window, she leans in and presses against it with a passionate gaze, repeatedly demanding that he not move. Tsurejure's eyes widen in disbelief, not only because of her closeness, but also because she speaks perfect Japanese. Without warning, her strength seems to vanish, and she, falling face forward, collapses to the ground right in front of the van. Tsurezure looks from the driver's seat and wonders if the fight has indeed taken its toll or if she is seriously wounded. He cautiously steps out of the car, approaches her lying body, and calls out, checking if she is conscious. She is motionless, and the silence of the forest covers again as he stands over his mysterious savior. He stares at the fallen warrior woman, and a chain of thoughts races through his mind. He needs to determine what she is. A human body maybe, but the long pointed ears whisper, no, this is something else. He runs through names from myths and legends in his memory: pixie, imp, fairy, and finally settles on one word, elf. Surveying the massacre, he cannot help but admit, the traces of his movement are obvious. Here is the huge body of a monster, strange creatures with green skin, and a landscape that has nothing in common with any part of Japan he knows. Looking at the senseless elf, he finally realized the truth. This is not the world he came from. He froze in place, cold sweat appearing on his forehead as he tried to comprehend the impossible. His thoughts tugged between concepts like multiversal reality or interdimensional travel, but they sounded like empty words about something he could not truly grasp. Alone between his van and the remnants of the supernatural battle, he finally realized he had somehow ended up in a completely different world. Tsurezure carefully prepares a hot bowl of porridge from a retort pouch. On his face is a warm calm as he watches a white owl sitting on his shoulder. He is pleased that he can offer guests something truly hearty. The warrior woman bites and closes her eyes with trembling happiness, as if the taste of a warm dish revives her again. This is clearly the best thing she has eaten in recent days. While she ate, she told how everything had brought her here. A hunt that went awry turned into a clash with a dangerous animal. In this chaos, she lost all her supplies and had been wandering for several days without a single crumb of food and without a drop of water. He listens and increasingly feels growing misunderstanding, especially when she says that when she first saw him, she decided he is already being devoured by a monster. He understands. They speak the same language, but the meaning of her words is strange, as if between them are two different realities. He points to the giant metal transport behind him. He asks if this is the monster she mentioned. She solemnly nods, admitting, although it now seems asleep and quiet, to her eyes it still looks like a formidable and dangerous creature. This revelation plunges him into deep reflection. He rests his chin on his hand, and only now does the weight of the situation overwhelm him. The fact that she looks at the camper van as a living being confirms his suspicion. He has truly crossed into a world where the usual common sense from his home no longer works. Breaking the silence, she makes a polite bow and introduces herself. Gina sincerely thanks for saving her life with food. He responds just as politely, naming himself Yoshioka Tsurezure, but quickly asks her to call him simply Tsurezure for greater informality. Then he cautiously asks if the name Japan means anything to her, hoping for at least a crumb of familiarity. She denies it grimly and shakes her head. She has never heard of such a place. Then she asks if it is the name of his native village and leaves him alone with how infinitely far apart their origins have diverged. He listens silently while she introduces herself as an elf from the village of Harkim. While she speaks, he mulls over a strange trait, the ability to understand, and wonders if his camper van is hiding the key to the way home. His gaze lingers on her while thoughts race, colliding with the consequences of this new world and the mysterious girl standing before him. While she continues to eat porridge with complete concentration, he cannot help but notice how sincere and straightforward she is despite her military past. Suddenly she jumps back sharply with a sharp scream. Her body tenses, the fighting stance triggers instinctively. She immediately apologizes and says that after several days of fighting alone, her reflexes are just a hair away from triggering, and he tries to calm her down. He offers to take over the cleaning. She insists on washing the dishes herself, only determination in her eyes as she looks for any way to be helpful in exchange for his kindness. He looks at her with a gentle smile, moved by her sense of duty. Turning his gaze to the small white owl sitting nearby, he muses aloud, whether she likes this camper or if she is even capable of understanding his words. The owl responds with a quiet, wise hoot as if confirming his suspicions. A little later, he sits in front of the flickering interface of his vehicle's control panel. It shows a balance of 10 points and a list of available updates. He decides it's time to check what this system is capable of and how it can help them. He studies various functions, navigation, repairs, and supplies, noting the cost of each in points. Realizing that his resources are limited, he understands. The next move must be chosen with extreme caution to survive in this unknown land. He starts by activating the navigation system. The screen flickers and comes to life, showing a detailed map of Kodyo Kingdom ready to guide them through unknown terrain. While the map works, he shifts his attention to other vital needs, selecting fuel and water supply functions. In this wild wilderness, survival is impossible without them, and he knows they cannot afford to be without them. Despite the confirmation on the screen that supplies are automatically replenished, he looks around the cabin confused. Nothing changed, and he is left with only doubt, whether the system really works as it should. He inspects the internal sensors and the water dispenser, but the levels do not budge. Uncertainty gnaws at him as he tries to understand when and how these resources will appear. The burden of the situation finally begins to weigh down, and he sinks forward, broken by a sudden wave of homesickness. He is drawn to the simple, guileless childhood journeys, far from the demands of this strange world. He shakes off his sorrow. He notices 7 points remain and finds an option for a transport shelter. The idea immediately appeals to drive a huge camper through mountainous, weather-beaten forests is no easy task, and hiding it in a cave is a huge advantage. He carefully reads the activation instructions, incredibly simple. Just point both hands at the vehicle and say the command. He cannot help but feel a slight distrust of such a magical process. Having ventured into the deep thickets, he decides to test the theory in practice. To his complete surprise, as soon as he gives the command, a huge camper van disappears in a flash of light, and he is left alone in the clearing. A small white owl kept him company. He froze in place, his gaze glued to the empty spot where a huge transport had just stood. Panic was growing. He realized how serious everything was and wondered what he would do now that his only shelter had vanished as if into thin air. Guessing the command, he sharply thrust his hands forward and thundered, ordering the ship to turn around. Nearby, a small white owl watched him with wide, curious eyes as he tried to reverse the magic. With a sharp, heavy thump, the trailer appeared again in place, and its solar panels flashed in the rays. He gasped sharply from shock, stunned by how useful this function was. It was truly incredible. The elven warrior with wide-open eyes watched the screen. Her former doubts melted away, giving way to deep respect. She decided he was probably a master summoner, since he could summon such a huge creature in an instant. And bowed her head, sincerely thanking him for his help. She continued, not hiding her surprise. Even the great forest owl was beside him. He looked at the bird and then at the warrior, and his confusion only grew, for he finally understood this little creature in this world mattered far more than he had imagined. Addressing him with a new measure of respect, she called him Lord Tsurezure, a title that completely threw him off balance. Even the owls seemed to acknowledge the change in intonation, quietly emitting a soft "hoo," while the warrior's gaze sharpened with sudden, incredibly focused attention. Without warning, she snatched with the blade. A sharp flash of steel and struck the small object that was hidden or perhaps discarded. It jerked from the sudden cruelty of the movement, the gaze fixed on the glowing ring that now fell right before him. When she strode away stubbornly, he called after her. Trembled in his voice. He rushed to catch up, desperately asking if he had accidentally offended her or perhaps done something wrong to provoke such a sharp reaction. It rushed with blinding speed, but the threat was far from over. The veil of darkness parted and suddenly a huge goblin with green skin loomed before them. Its mouth was agape, foul saliva dripping from its jaws. Tsurezure shuddered in pure shock. His thoughts raced. Where did this green monster come from? Without any pause, the warrior swung the blade and unleashed a deadly, flickering strike on the enemy. The goblin's head was severed in an instant. Dark blood splattered into the air. Calmly she noted, "These creatures are scavengers, drawn to the sharp smell of monster corpses," while her companion trembled with fear. When the first threat fell, another goblin aimed from above. Her crude weaponry rays aimed for a deadly strike. Tsurezure barely managed to register the new attacker, but his companion was already one step ahead. Her hand glowed as she prepared for a counter-strike. A squall of sharp, magical energy tore through the air, ripping the jumping goblin apart before it could land. The creature was thrown back, its body pierced with holes as it crashed into the ground. In a matter of seconds, the remains of the fallen goblins began to decompose, dissolving into clouds of black smoke that vanished with the wind. Tsurezure froze in place, his eyes wide open in disbelief at the efficiency and speed of the battle that had just ended. Sudden cruelty vanished, yielding to a heavy silence broken only by the steady patter of rain. The forest seemed to freeze as the immediate threat passed, leaving only the survivors in the wet clearing. Turning to her companions, Gina suggested setting off before new marauders appeared. She outlined her plan to return to Harkim village, the nearest settlement, a relatively safe place where the monsters terrorizing the vast wild lands do not reach. Then she handed the young man an official invitation, calling him her salvation and inviting him to join her. Tsurezure weighed the options. He understood that the village might hold the keys to understanding this strange land or even the way back to his world, while the white owl watched him intently, as if she knew everything. He asks if the little white owl can go with them, and she warmly agrees, joyfully inviting them both to travel with her. Suddenly she stumbles and falls to her knees, her body trembling. He rushes to her headlong, anxiously asking if she was hurt after the previous clash. Thunderous rumbling bursts from within her, rolling like an echo through the quiet glade. He and the owl freeze watching, and in the stunned silence it becomes clear where her accident really happened. Overwhelmed with shame, she covers her face and apologizes for this indecent display. He immediately calms her, realizing she hasn't eaten for several days, and offers portable rations, has them on hand. While they prepare to set off, the sky darkens and a bloody heavy rain falls, striking the frightening desert landscape with columns. He retreats to the safety of his car and looks through the window as she stands alone under the raging downpour, while the truck nearby idles quietly. Looking through the glass at her, he sees how the hood is pulled off her head, soaked through from the storm. and the silhouetteity against the gray sky. He calls, inviting her to hide inside the camper where it is dry. But she politely refuses, saying she is used to the rain and has already regained her strength. Then he asks how much longer they have to travel to reach the village. He continues riding through the rain and listens as the elf explains the way forward. She says, if the horse reached Harkham village in one day, it would take them 2.5 days on foot. Her voice barely trembles with sorrow as she recalls the horse she lost during the monster attack. Through the long road ahead, he urges her to go inside and explains that the transport is fast and will protect from the rain. He warns, the cold will only exhaust her strength more. She utters a quiet thank you, but still remains outside. Despite his invitation, she hesitates significantly. Her face darkens with deeply sown fear. She confesses, she trusts him, but the thought of crossing the threshold of what looks like the entrails of a huge beast frightens her to trembling. He looks at her and finally understands. Her refusal is not about him, it is about the strange machine he calls home. She continues to explain her conflict. Although grateful for the food he gave her, she is naturally troubled by hesitation entering the private space of a stranger she has just met. In response, he comes forward with renewed enthusiasm, dismissing her warnings and insisting that he will gladly meet the person who saved him. He tries to reassure her, saying this is not something to fear, but a tool created precisely to make the long journey pleasant. He begins listing the numerous conveniences hidden in the metal walls. How one can cook food there, sit comfortably, stretch out their legs, and even sleep soundly. When he mentions that the shower will wash away the day's dirt, she looks at him with wide-open eyes. The idea is completely foreign to her. When a strange crew rolls across the open steppes beneath towering mountains, the nature of their journey becomes clear. It is a vessel of absolute freedom. It can take them anywhere, whether by a familiar route or to an unknown land. He concludes the explanation by saying that nothing threatens them inside, neither insects that bite painfully at night nor wild animals. Heat reigns during the day or frost cracks at night. Inside it is still cozy, and bad weather is powerless here. He continues his speech and gestures inside, emphasizing how spacious the place is there, explaining that it is so large to fit several people. He imagines it as a hub where moments with family and friends can be carefully preserved. Leaning out the window and smiling wildly, he briefly recounts the essence of the machine, simply a house that moves. Suddenly his face twitches, the realization just dawns on him. The burden of reality settles on him and he slides onto the handlebars. He begins to get nervous. He fears the dangers of this world, wonders what will happen if monsters appear, and worries about the dwindling supplies of water and fuel and the unstable electricity supply. Looking closely, the elf notices the deep affection he clearly feels for this strange metal companion. He catches her gaze and immediately feels a sharp spasm of anxiety, fearing that his outburst of technical remarks might have pushed her away. But despite everything, she gives a gentle smile. Her eyes soften when she recalls his description of the mobile house for lovers, and she understands. This idea is truly wonderful. He exhales with relief at her consent. He turns to the window and watches the rain trickle down the glass while a small white owl peacefully dozes nearby. He looks back from the driver's seat just as the morning light breaks through the dense canopy and illuminates the clearing where their strange journey stopped. Looking up at the clear sky, she notices how suddenly it became beautiful, and this throws him off track while he peers through the window, and next to him sits a small fluffy owlet. Above them, the sky is pierced by dazzling flashes of light, and the celestial glow envelops the rugged mountain peaks and the solitary transport standing below. For a moment he is riveted by the spectacle, quietly whispers admiration to the empty air. Nearby she slowly lowers her hood, and the cool morning air touches her face as she surveys the landscape. Her face softens. A faint blush appears on her cheeks as she turns back to the window. Addressing him with formal respect, she admits that although fear still trembles in her heart, she hopes that someday he will truly take her with him on his travels. He immediately responds with a bright, sincere, admiring confirmation. His face lights up with a genuine smile. He begins to add another thought, and his excitement echoes with the quiet presence of a white owl nearby. Leaning even further toward the window to shorten the distance between them, he suggests they drop the formalities and asks to be called simply Shajido. She hesitates, seeking confirmation, and then he adds that he will address her just as simply, Gina. A gentle smile flashes across her face as she tries to say his name for the first time. She is drawn by the feeling of new closeness, and she sincerely hopes for their future. Tsurezure is how true partnership is born. She accepts the new terms of their relationship with a warm, restrained official greeting, but the sharp shift in intimacy proves too much for the traveler. A wave of awkwardness overwhelms him. He covers his face with his hands and hides his gaze, recalling how strange and embarrassing it feels to be addressed simply as a young woman. Noticing his state, she asks what happened, but he hastily brushes it off, trying to compose himself while the dealer watches from the driver's seat. As they continued through the jagged, snow-covered peaks of the mountain ridge, his thoughts once again sank inward. He admitted to himself, returning to his original world, still no changes. Yet he could no longer deny the harsh beauty of this land, and more importantly, he suddenly realized he was still capable of finding deep, genuine connections with others, a part of himself he had feared long ago discarded. But this quiet moment of reflection and new hope is barely suspended by retrospective fear. Later, he will look back on this peaceful morning with a heavy heart and realize how carelessly he was unaware of the horrors doomed to erupt the very next day. The camp remains quiet. The Alforier sleeps soundly on the ground, unaware that the young man and his fluffy white owlet are watching him from the safe window of the camper. Inside, he eventually succumbs to exhaustion and finds relief in the warmth of his bed, deciding to set aside worries for these days and fall asleep. Everything scatters around when the mighty roar of thunder rises to awaken, and a terrible picturea huge, eyelidless eye looks down on the camp. She warns him in a frantic scream to move from the spot, but he reacts slowly, blinks in confusion, and asks, "What could be wrong?" Before he can move, a many-eyed monster looms over him. It is huge, clumsy, and its hunchbacked hand is frozen ready to crush anything in its path. The beast's fist crashes down with a fierce blow, instantly throwing him into a state of complete paralyzed shock because the ground beneath him simply vanishes, shattered to pieces. Suddenly gasps forward and he instantly wakes up. The terrible image of the monster still burns in his memory until he realizes it was only a dream. When the reality of the nightmare settles, he doubts whether he is truly safe. On his blankets lies a strange, heavy weight that feels all too real. He suddenly sits up, breaking out of his chest with a frightened scream. His eyes widen as he fixes his gaze on the massive, white-feathered creature looming over his bed. Caught in shock, he is haunted by the thought, do the owls of this world really grow to such gigantic sizes overnight? While he watches, the creature suddenly begins to shrink. Within seconds it returns to its small, fluffy form. He thinks the bird might be some kind of monster, but he is even more confused. The wounds he suffered yesterday have completely disappeared. He climbed out of the strange metal wagon under the morning light. He pulls a bundle of bedding and looks back at the quiet glade, searching for where his companion went. She soon comes out from behind the shelter belt, approaches him and meets him with a grateful smile, thanking him for the borrowed blankets. She admits she decided again to sleep outside because she still feels a mocking anxiety about getting into the cramped interior of his car. With an explosion of energy, she exclaims that she has never slept so soundly and then suddenly stops. She realizes falling into such a deep sleep in the wilderness is a dangerous mistake. She explains her usual routine is to sleep on tree branches or on hard ground, covered only by a cloak, to remain alert to the slightest movement of predators. Noticing her slight limp, he asks if she was injured while gathering the herbs she now holds. She brushes off his concern and insists it is a minor scratch, a small price for the medicinal plants she found to repay his kindness. She admits that the battle with the monster left her with pain and swelling in her leg for days. But she assures this will not prevent her from walking. He suggests looking for a compress or medicine to help with recovery. Her stomach rumbles loudly, breaking the serious moment and making her blush with embarrassment. She quickly apologizes and promises to find something to eat immediately while he watches her with a soft, all-knowing smile. Noticing her hunger, he offers to take the helm of cooking and asks if she will allow him to cook with the ingredients he gathered. She freezes in place and explains. After losing her tools along with the horse, she only planned to wash and fry the food. But he assures that he can make it much tastier. The warrior is silent. Her eyes widen as she contemplates his unexpected offer of culinary skill. Receiving her silent approval, he returns inside his strange dwelling and sets about cooking. As soon as he is inside, he is pleasantly surprised. The water tank is full, and the fuel is replenished all in just one night. It is easier on the soul knowing that this vessel takes care of itself, and even the little white owl seems to agree with this, a quiet movement of its hood. While he arranges the reward, she brings various mushrooms and mountain vegetables. He places them next to his own supplies of pasta and broth. He carefully examines the local flora and notes how it resembles familiar ingredients, mushrooms and yams. Even though he is in another world, he decides to trust her hunting experience regarding safety, accepting that he will have to adapt to local food if he wants to survive until he finds a way home. He begins cooking by putting the pasta to boil and simultaneously starts on the mushrooms, cut into bite-sized pieces. The double burner on his compact kitchen proves very useful as he prepares consomme in a separate pot. Continuing his work, he energetically mashes the mountain yam until it becomes perfectly sticky. When the pasta is almost ready, he transfers it into the quiet broth consomme, allowing the flavors to meld during the last brief boil. The result is a hot bowl of consomme soup with pasta, topped with a delicate portion of grated yam. This dish was specially created to restore strength and soothe the fatigue from their journey. When the spicy aroma fills the air, he pauses for a moment and enjoys the scent, noticing the little white owl attentively watching him. After that, he gently offers to share the meal with the fluffy creature. Outside, two companions settle at a modest table under the open sky. The move from a cramped kitchen to the boundless primeval forest emphasizes the strange comfort of their temporary camp. The elf warrior stared at the unfamiliar dish, curiosity mixed with hesitation. He explained, "The best way to taste it is to scoop a full spoonful of soup along with all the other ingredients." As soon as she took the first bite, she was instantly overwhelmed by a sensation she had never known before. The texture of the pasta and the richness of the broth left her with wide-open eyes, and held breath she tried to comprehend such culinary perfection. She eats with a new wild passion, and her thoughts race to identify the spices that could create such a deep and complex flavor. She wonders how exactly the hand-picked mushrooms transformed. The earthy taste perfectly highlights the unique, sticky texture of yam. She beams with joy, praises him both as a master chef and as a summoner. He smiles in response, genuinely pleased that his cooking brought her so much happiness, while the little white owl chirps happily nearby. The little creature continues to scrape food with its beak, and she watches with a soft, grateful expression. He observes both and feels satisfaction shared in this moment. Somewhere outside behind the large white transport that serves as their mobile home, the group sits at a table outdoors. The dealer stands nearby, absorbing the calm atmosphere of the camp while they finish drinking and tasting the last bits. He realizes the simple pleasure sharing a meal with others does not change, no matter what world he finds himself in. Next to him, she continues to savor the same aftertastes, a gentle smile glowing on her face. She formally thanks him for the feast, and her voice sounds sincere and truly grateful. He demurs, noting that it was the local ingredients, mushrooms and mountain yam, that made the dish truly special. Nearby, the fluffy white owlet has already drifted into a deep sleep, belly full. He glances at the creature and frowns slightly, unsure if it was wise to feed it human food. It is quite different from the owls he knew at home. Gina shifts the conversation to the mysterious bird and asks how it is connected to the forest owl. She recalls how he saved it from green-skinned monsters and says they have not parted since. She explains that these creatures are revered as rare monsters who protect crops from pests and are even worshipped as divine messengers. Tsurezure listens in shock. He had no idea that his small, fluffy companion, whom he treated so carelessly, holds such a prestigious and sacred status in this land. He pondered the creature's intelligence, trying to understand if it truly comprehended his words considering its history of helping people. Gina watched everything in awe, amazed that the forest messenger could speak so clearly. Continuing his thoughts, he asked whether he should also adopt the official title Forest Owl, and the bird's skeptical expression made it clear he preferred something more personal. He realized that calling him Owl forever would be quite boring. He began naming possible names, trying out Hedwig, Minerva, and Kepra, but each of his suggestions was met with a look of complete indifference from the fluffy creature. Noticing that she did not like grand titles, he smiled and suggested something much simpler: Leg Up. He watched as the name was just announced and immediately responded. The owl flapped its wings with a joyful hoot, confirming approval. He found it funny that such a simple name was the one that ultimately won her heart. Gina bowed slightly, accepting the new name for Divine Messenger, then indicated that the sun was high in the sky was a sign. Time to continue their journey. Before them stretched endless, open steppes, and under the clear sky they were framed by distant, jagged mountain peaks. Sitting behind the wheel, he noted how much smoother the ground had become. The road became noticeably easier until they finally reached the busy main road. He leans out of the driver's seat and calls Jinox if she still has even a little fear of that huge creature they are traveling on. In response, she pauses and her expression softens as she contemplates the question. The first fear that just a moment ago gripped her chest begins to reset, completely shifting to a different feeling. She begins to recall the previous night and admits, the bed was unexpectedly comfortable, but there was another reason in the silence of sleep. He watches her intently, intrigued by such a change in mood. Next to the giant machine, she stopped and explained her discovery. This behemoth did not seem a threat, rather a protection that allowed her to relax her vigilance. His eyes widened slightly at her words. He is touched by the unexpected trust she places in him and the companion he will call. She continues and explains. Since he is the one who called, and since little Fuda is also nearby, the once terrifying creature now looks calm, gentle, and surprisingly reliable. With sincere regret in her gaze, she apologizes for her initial hostility and for trying to hit him when they first met. Then, with a glimmer of hope, she asks if she can join them on this journey now that her fear has passed. She gives permission with a warm smile, assuring that even the car seems to gladly welcome her presence. Filled with gratitude, she shines her eyes sparkle as she officially joins the group, and a video recording chirps cheerfully from her shoulder. He jerks sharply in fright when the little white owl suddenly starts flapping its wings wildly and chirping in the cabin with frantic urgency. He reaches out to the excited bird. He asks what caused such a commotion. But when he looks at the landscape through the window, he sees nothing, only the dense greenery of the forest. Turning to the warrior for an answer, he asks if she sees anything. Her face hardens, and she calls his name and confirms, a dangerous monster is already very close. A piece of the road is torn away. A huge creature resembling a moose crawls out of the forest, with shimmering eyes and sharp teeth looming over the path. It growls, breathes hot air, and releases thick clouds of steam into the air while watching the vehicle intently and predatory. Trembling, he notices that although this creature is smaller than the titans they have already faced, it is no less terrifying. The warrior calls the beast Deke and warns. Its size is deceptive, its strength is deadly, and it could turn into a disaster if they suddenly attack, so he advises trying to sneak past more quietly. She watches the beast closely and grows increasingly uneasy. It has already shifted into a posture of pure aggression, ready for immediate confrontation. Without any warning, the monster explodes with a deafening, bone-chilling roar, showing its rows of razor-sharp teeth in a blatant declaration of hostility. It looms before them, a creature that usually avoids main roads and stays submissive, harder to anger. The genome explains, this particular animal is unusually excited, so fleeing by transport is a vain hope. It runs twice as fast as a horse and will relentlessly chase them, regardless of terrain. She draws a wedge with a ringing metallic clink, ordering Tsurezure not to move or make a sound. He looks at her. His face clouds with fear and uncertainty as the full weight of the moment finally sinks in. The warrior woman stands firm. Her resolve hardens as she vows to protect Tsurezure and the rest of their group. With weapon at the ready, she prepares to meet this monstrosity charging head-on. Suddenly, the beast bursts forward at terrifying speed, its bulky body turning into a blurred whirlwind of fur and muscle. From the safety of the car, Tsurezure can only watch in shock as the creature closes the distance in an instant, its speed defying its weight. She meets the attack with a maneuvering charge at speed, leaping into the air and striking the monster in the head. The impact sparks fly proof of the elf's agility against the brute force of D. Rings sound from the blow as her sword strikes the creature's thick hide, but the beast barely flinches. Its glowing eyes lock onto the prey with deadly intent. She lands gracefully, quickly repositions without lowering her guard as the fight intensifies fiercely. The ground trembles with every step of the monster. Her eyes widen sharply, and suddenly alarm flares as Deke performs a powerful stomp jump. His massive hooves pound the earth with bone-breaking force. The scale of the beast and the power within it become eerily clear. She barely manages to avoid the devastating trampling from the huge beast. The ground cracks under its weight. Despite the pressure, she stays focused, pushing through the chaos and preparing a counterstrike, releasing a burst of magical energy. The warrior's movements falter as a sharp pain suddenly pierces her leg. Her face twists in agony. Without risking danger, from the safe cabin, Tsurezure impatiently calls out with concern, asking what happened, but she quickly brushes off his worry. Says her leg just hurts and she needs a moment to apply some additional herbs. He watches helplessly, his thoughts feverishly searching for any way to help while the deceptive feint continues and overwhelms him with relentless attack. Meanwhile, the elf is forcibly thrown into a desperate dance of survival. He barely slips under the massive jaw with fangs as the creature lunges forward at terrifying speed. A sudden thought strikes his head as he looks at the tablet and considers whether adding one specific feature might shift their fate. In desperation, he shouts abruptly and starts frantically tapping the interface, deciding to activate the vehicle's hidden ability to disrupt the course of the game. He grips the steering wheel with new determination, roars Gina's name, and declares that he is coming to her aid as soon as the car charges straight at that gigantic monster. The windshield frames a chaotic scene before him. The beast towers, menacingly and unaware that the metal trump card is about to burst into battle. Tsurezure exits the van chamber holding a small container, while Fuda lingers in the background. Meanwhile, Gina is in the middle of a desperate maneuver, sliding through the mud to slip away from the attack. She understands she must draw the beast away from her comrades. Even when this gigantic Deke monster looms behind, heavy steps shake the ground. The warrior woman shouts, her voice trembling with despair as she tries to keep her distance from the creature. Suddenly, Tsurezure appears on the roof of the car, clanging metal lids against each other and shouting at the top of his lungs, luring that big idiot right to him. The monster, enraged by the noise, turns its predatory gaze away from Gina and lunges at the van. He activates the team with a decisive shout, and the machine manages to prepare for the strike while he jumps to safety. The giant monster strikes the van's roof with all its might using its huge hoof, and the blow breaks bones, creating a shockwave around. Its weight is so colossal that the vehicle's tires sink deep into the soft ground, and Gina stands staring with her mouth agape in complete disbelief. She, gripped by terror, watches as a huge, deep monster crashes its weight onto the camper van, and the ground trembles from the force of the impact. The young man understands. His plan is working. Since the handbrake was not pulled, the van rolls like a toy under the paw of a beast, but its deafening roar drives out of him and the little white owl a pure, irreversible horror. Due to the lack of friction, the massive hoof of the creature slides right off the roof of the vehicle, and it wildly jerks as soon as it completely loses support. The impulse pushes the beast forward, and it crashes face first into the ground with a muffled roar, while the survivors stand neither alive nor dead, watching as what was once a formidable threat crumbles into a pile of fur and muscles. When the dust finally settles, the monster lies motionless on the forest floor. Tsurezure approaches its wrecked vehicle and with a heavy heart sees the solar panels are shattered and the roof is badly dented. He pauses to breathe, his face pale after the ordeal. The pulsating interface inside the van confirms that the emergency body reinforcement protocol worked, providing the necessary structural strength to survive the trampling. Then he turns back to his companions and bows low a gesture of deep regret, lamenting that he had to rely on their strength despite his promise to protect them. But the elven warrior quickly brushes off the apologies, insisting that without him they would not have survived. Then she gestures toward the vehicle, her curiosity ignited by this sturdy machine, and asks if it belongs to his acquaintance. From this cultural confusion about his modern transport, he is momentarily speechless. She repeated the name with a barely noticeable confusion and frowned, trying to understand the meaning of the word. Tsurezure quickly explained that it was simply a name he gave to his companion, and she immediately felt as if it were an abbreviation of a much longer, more official title. Seeing her accept this idea, he realized she truly believed the transport was alive, some kind familiar to her species, because the machine had capabilities far beyond local understanding. He decided it was best to leave the misunderstanding as is and later invite her inside the beast so she could see for herself. He officially introduced the two, announcing that from this day the vessel would be called CAMPER. With relief, since the creature was supposedly unharmed, she brushed off the external damage, saying it was just a few disheveled strands. A smile returned as the tension finally eased. Standing before the enormous fallen Deke, she noted that she had never actually seen the familiar one consume anything, and guessed, if the monster were fed its own meat, it might regain its strength. Tsurezure shuddered not only from the suggestion itself, but also from the fact that the flesh of this creature was considered a high-quality, nutritious delicacy. He noted that the beast's appearance was the only thing that interrupted her hunt, so she needed to take the trophies of their victory with her. He suggested using the storage for transport to carry the huge haul, and she agreed without hesitation as she prepared to start gathering. With refined ease, she gets to work, cutting through the thick skin and muscles on the monster's leg. When the space in the cargo bed began to run out, she marveled at how much it could hold, yet still worried that leaving the rest of the meat behind would be a waste. Tsurezure, watching her work, suddenly recalled a specific function he had seen before, an infinite storage that could solve their problem. He accessed the internal interface and saw that only 3 upgrade points remained. He really wanted to enable automatic repair to restore external damage, but the infinite storage cost 2 points, so he had to choose between utility and technical condition. He listens while Gina explains the colossal value of the monster Deke. Its meat, hide, and horns will sell for a lot of money and bring joy to everyone in her village. And it is then that he understands how dearly she loves the people from her home. Looking straight at him with a soft, aching sadness, she admits that she has no family of her own. Because of her loneliness, she continues, it was the peasants who showed her true kindness, and now she feels a deep, relentless need to repay that debt in any way she can. He watches her stunned by the weight of her gratitude. Feeling the heaviness of the atmosphere she created, she quickly apologizes for touching on such personal matters, but he gently reassures her. No need to worry. He freezes for a moment. A look of quiet understanding passes over his face as he contemplates the depth of her connection with her community from. Suddenly ignited with determination, he orders her to wait a moment and disappears to consult with CAMPER, leaving her standing in place with slight confusion. Turning back to the interface, he chooses the infinite Tsurezure upgrade option that promises not only limitless cargo space, but also a time pause. Time stops inside the compartment as soon as the doors close. The camper van stands ready, Outside it is inconspicuous, but now it hides an infinite, timeless emptiness capable of carrying the full weight of their loot back to the village. Tsurezure opens the rear door of the camper van, checking with the navigation system that this is indeed the correct entrance. In the cramped compartment, a dark vortex spins and humps with a strange, magnetic energy. He understands. The upgrade works perfectly and encourages Gina to bring bigger pieces of the beast. She silently freezes in shock as a huge piece of meat is effortlessly pulled into the turbulent void and instantly disappears. She effortlessly lifts a huge horn, asking if it can hold such a large thing. She just stands and marvels, captivated by the incredible physical strength of the elf as he easily takes the heavy trophy. When the giant deer antler gets pulled into a tiny hole, she asks with wide-open eyes if this van just ate it. He replies that this is the unique power of the camper. It can store an incredible volume of cargo regardless of its physical size. He suggests dismantling the rest of the creature so they can transport all the meat and valuable hide. She enthusiastically agrees, warmly thanking him for the help for providing such a vital resource for her people. Together they set to work under the open sky, carefully removing the skin and processing the carcass of the giant creature to prepare it for transportation. One by one, the large sections of the monster are pulled into the van's Tsurezure, find the laws of physics, as they disappear through the small door into the infinite space inside. When the task was completed, they put everything back in place. She takes one last look at the clearing where the battle took place, then gets into the truck with him ready to head back to her village. She leans out of the window of the moving vehicle, her wide-open eyes filled with delight from the journey, and the wind whips her hair. They overcome the treacherous terrain. The young man steps forward and leads the giant machine through the narrow mountain pass, holding his hands high to show the direction. Eventually, the couple stops near the cliff, gets out, and looks around at the wild grandeur of the surrounding peaks, while a white owl circles above them. When the sun begins its decline, casting long shadows across the valley, the tourist stubbornly continues the steady trek through the wilderness. The elven warrior shines with joy in the cabin, marvels at the incredible speed of that vehicle, and openly rejoices that she will bring monster meat as a gift for a girl named Irina. She explains that Irina is a kind, cheerful girl who has been feeling unwell lately, and hopes that the nutritious, rich meat will be just what she needs to regain her strength. He listens carefully to her story and agrees. It is necessary to get to the village as soon as possible to deliver the help that is so lacking. She suddenly points forward with a cry of joy as the village finally appears on the horizon, and he silently thinks about hope. This first encounter with a human settlement might provide clues on how to return to his world. He approaches the rural settlement, a cluster of wooden buildings pressed against a rocky backdrop, protected by a sturdy perimeter fence. From above, the guard shields his eyes from the light, squints and scrutinizes the approaching figures until his face changes to pure shock. He recognizes the travelers. Seeing familiar faces, the elven warrior woman sincerely waves her hand and shouts to Eben and Belk that she has safely returned to the village. In response, two men leap from their posts, racing across the open field to meet their long-absent companion with relief. When they reach her, she recounts the terrible journey, telling about encounters with both Mutavora and Deke, and thanks her companion for surviving, which completely knocks the guard off balance. Stepping forward, the young man introduces himself as Shiguru, and the guards Eben and Belk scrutinize him skeptically, noting his slender build and unusual clothing unlike their rough gear. Seeing their doubts, she quickly intervenes and insists he is a powerful summoner with incredible culinary skills. The guards are puzzled how exactly is cooking related to their survival in the wild wilderness. Ready to show even more of his wonders, she asks if she can introduce them to the camp, and he can only offer a shy, confused response to her boundless energy. She brings the huge boxy transport to the stunned centuries, who barely believe the scale of this metal monster before them. Two men, even Belk, freeze in disbelief. Their mouths agape as they try to comprehend, is this some kind of stone golem or a strange new ally? In response to their confusion, she explains, earlier they encountered Deke and used this campy to transport the kill back to the village. Eben still does not believe, doubting that such a creature can be moved so easily, and probably thinks they only brought back one limb. To put an end to this matter, the rear part of the car suddenly flips open, and before the guard's eyes literally appears a mountain of processed meat, causing them to involuntarily jump back in shock. They are completely covered by the sight. They realize that the entire Deke has truly been fully returned, and this is no longer just impossible, but a feat. Noticing their surprise, she beams with pride and explains, this is the true power of Tsurezure and his tamed Campy. The guards instantly change their tone, bow their heads, and apologize for their previous disrespect, now perceiving the young man as a master of incredible skill. Word about the incredible haul spreads through the settlements like wildfire, and very quickly a crowd gathers to see the grand stockpile of food and the mysterious guest who helps preserve it. While the villagers were talking about the monster controlled by the stranger, he felt a wave of relief, grateful that their ideas about magical creatures were flexible enough to accept motorized transport, suspecting nothing more. He watches as a young girl named Irina rushes out of the village like a whirlwind. Her face lights up with relief as she clings to Gina in fiercely strong embraces. The girl was wildly worried, but the elf's words gently soothe her. She is not injured, everything is fine. She promises the excited child a feast that will satisfy everyone, and recalls that they brought an incredible catch of meat. The child's eyes flash with disbelief and hunger, and the elf chuckles, savoring the silence after a long journey. His face remains calm, but in his eyes quickly flickers a poignant desire as he looks at the united community and the simple joy of their reunion after separation. He listens silently while the guards Eben and Belk shift their gaze to him and ask if he intended to stay in the village for long. He explains his situation, comparing himself to a lost traveler, trying to find the way back to where he belongs but not knowing where his path will lead next. He seizes the opportunity and asks if they recognize the name of his homeland, Japan, but the guards can only respond with empty looks. They admit they have not heard of it and say, although the village leader has traveled well and knows the world beyond the village, even he may not know the answers this stranger seeks. They insist that he must stay and recover in the guest house despite the lack of any information. The guards refuse to let the village sponsor sleep outside. They insist hospitality is the minimum they can offer to someone who helped theirs. Their announcement is met with a loud, boisterous cheer as they inform about the grand banquet in honor of Gina's return and the arrival of their new guest. He is bewildered by the sudden wild passion of the villagers, as soon as they start shouting and preparing for celebrations. When the noise grows around, she turns to him with a warm, sincere face, officially welcoming him to Hawken Village. He catches her gaze, and the burden of the road becomes lighter for a moment, her kindness and the promise of a safe place to rest. She watches the village of Hakim as it settles under the vast starry sky. Its roofs are silhouetted against the distant mountains. She follows the sounds of celebration to the very heart of the settlement. There, the festive atmosphere prevails, and the long table is laden with an abundance of local delicacies and drinks. The fighter stands at the edge of the crowd and watches as the peasants tend to huge spits. Thick chunks of meat are roasting and crackling over the open flame. She listens as nearby guards laugh heartily, assuring the young traveler there will be enough for everyone here. They explain that some of the meat is reserved for trade, but there will be plenty for the feast. And they insist he and his companion have already earned the right to eat their fill. They watch as the meat reaches the perfect golden brown sear, and the chefs begin slicing it into thick, juicy pieces that release a dense, fragrant steam into the night air. After this, the cooks placed a huge dish of freshly sliced roast before him, and his eyes widened at the sheer scale of the serving, couldn't believe it, until he was urged to enjoy the meal to the fullest. He barely holds his breath. The rich, appetizing aroma almost overwhelms him, and he realized the very scent alone already makes his mouth water. With high expectations, he prepares to take the first bite of the legendary deek meat. A small white owl impatiently perches on the wooden railing and freezes, staring with big eyes at the place from where such an appetizing steam rises. The air fills with the smell of fried, juicy meat, and it stirs a deep hunger within her. Next to it on the table lies a thick piece of meat on a hot stone. It sizzles and crackles while frying. Steam rises from the perfectly browned surface. Its rich aroma has already enchanted the little bird. Tsurezure freezes before the first bite, briefly thanks and presses the knife into the steak. Immediately he is struck by the unexpected texture. The meat is indeed from a huge, lean beast, but the blade glides through it with amazing ease. As the knife goes deeper, the tender fibers seem to part, releasing a new wave of juices. The meat looks incredibly juicy, much more tender than its tough origin would have promised. He finally tries, and the explosion of flavor is so sharp that his eyes open wide and his breath catches. It is a wild, rich aftertaste that far surpasses any beef or pork he has ever tasted, a piquant essence that seems to vibrate through his entire body. Eben looks with a connoisseur's smile and says that the meat is incredibly high quality because this creature has accumulated huge reserves of magical energy inside its enormous form. He freezes, enchanted by the sensation. The young man asks if it is magic that produces such a deep flavor. The veteran guard explains, magic flows through the bodies of all monsters, nourishing their ability to breathe fire or harden like iron. Then he goes on to talk about magic as the very essence of life and the power of this world. By devouring the flesh of such creatures, one can instantly drive away fatigue and even ease minor ailments, so it is a valuable source of vitality. Tsurezure listens without looking away. His head is buzzing as he realizes the scale of the very creature that became this nourishing meal. A brief anxiety touches him. Is such a mighty feast safe for someone from his world, but he cannot stop. He continues to eat, savoring every crumb. On the other side of the table, Eben watches the young man, enthusiasm reflected in a warm, grateful smile. A deep gratitude grows in him for the help Tsurezure provided. He looks into his bowl and even explains why they lack meat in their remote village. Usually, only small crumbs appear in the soup, since large prey like deeks are rare. Moreover, the government takes most of any substantial prey as taxes. Looking at the festive crowd, he sees pure joy on the villagers' faces as they feast. The rare abundance of meat has turned the atmosphere into a true celebration, and he suddenly understands how much their hunting means. The warrior herself is in high spirits, laughing as she thanks him for fulfilling her request and transporting the huge creature. Eben also joins the merriment, loudly urging him to drink and enjoy the celebration without any hesitation. Their meal is interrupted by a joyful exclamation, and a young girl runs up to them. She calls him familiarly, warmly. Her face shines with a sincere smile. She hands him a bowl of soup and explains that she cooked it from the best vegetables from her family's garden as thanks for the help to Gina. Eben confirms. The vegetables from her family are indeed the best in the village, reinforcing the sincere gift with her words. But her bright smile quickly fades as she is overtaken by a severe coughing fit. Worried, he asks if she is still unwell and even advises her to go to her mother and rest. When the girl leaves, a dignified elder with a long white beard approaches the table. He addresses the young man with solemn respect and asks if he is Lord Tsurezure, a title that completely throws him off balance. He chews in the middle of a bite when the village elder Libido finally introduces himself, apologizing for being late. There was a meeting in the neighboring village. The elder expresses sincere gratitude for the generous meat and furs, emphasizing how important such supplies are for the remote settlement, and the young man insists, saying it was no trouble at all. Changing the subject, he asks about the features of elves, specifically noting their long, pointed ears. He notes that Gina is the only elf woman he has seen since he arrived, and asks the elder about her origin and family history. The elder's gaze becomes distant as he recalls a time over 15 years ago when the village was inhabited only by humans. He describes the day when an elf woman named Martel came to the village, carrying young Gina on her back. Although the villagers hesitated to approach the races they had never seen, they allowed Martel to stay after she begged for a place to live. She found a home in a ruined stable and worked tirelessly to raise her daughter. Cultivating the surroundings and her water magic helped them survive in this isolation. She became an integral part of the village. Thanks to her unique gifts, she kept the community afloat. During droughts, she called water to quench the thirsty fields, and when a neighbor was injured, she was immediately there to wash and bandage wounds with caring tenderness. This dedication became especially evident the night when fire threatened to unhesitatingly consume the village's winter supplies. She unleashed all her power to extinguish the flames before they turned their salvation to ashes. However, these efforts came at the cost of tremendous losses. The villagers did not fully understand the nature of her magic, but it was clear this feat drained her very life force. She fainted and did not regain consciousness for several days, leaving the community in anxious watchfulness. Over the years, the bond between the two elves and the villagers only grew stronger. They were no longer strangers. They shared meals, lived in a true home, and the local children warmly welcomed the young girl into their games as if she had been one of them from the very beginning. 7 years ago, this heavy one piece broke. It was suddenly seized by a rare and relentless disease. She left quickly, and the village was not ready to fill the void. Death took their protector and friend. The whole village mourned the loss. They looked at the young orphan she left behind and made a collective vow to raise her as their own so that she would never truly be alone. Turning to the present time, the elder openly shares with the guests. Despite all their care, the girl still carries the heavy burden of alienation, pushing herself to be useful as if justifying her own existence among people. The young man listens attentively, and a look of deep understanding appears on his face as he admits that he knows exactly how such isolation feels. He reflects on the strange shadow of loneliness that can remain even amid kindness, on the feeling that you are fundamentally different, and it is this that forces you to work with despair to feel, even once, that you belong. He listens attentively while the elder explains the burden of Gina's legacy. Being the only one of her kind in the village, she could not help but feel a deep isolation, a loneliness born solely from the fact that she was different. Watching him, the elder continues and expresses gratitude that someone like him took care of her. He notes that traveling with the forest owl proves he is not an ordinary person. This remark completely confuses the boy, and the fluffy creature chirps with a quiet, trembling hoot, as if confirming its own importance. Then he gently pats the guest on the shoulder and announces that it is time for the elders to go to sleep for the night, encouraging him to stay and have a good time. The young man thanks him, feeling the weight of the day's events, while the little owl comfortably settles on his head. A sudden thought strikes Himhai's eyes widen in shock. He completely forgot to ask the elder about his original world, although Eben had previously assured that the village chief knows about the lands beyond their borders. Caught in thought about the wasted opportunity, he shifts his gaze, and Gina approaches with a warm smile and asks if he likes the celebrations. He instantly dismisses all his worries and assures her, the holiday is wonderful and the food is truly incredibly delicious. She tells him that she will be the one to escort him to the guest house every time he wants to rest. Admitting exhaustion, he decides it's time to finish and asks if she will lead him forward. Walking beside her, he suddenly feels a strange discomfort. He covers his face while thinking about how the knowledge of her family's history suddenly made their conversations too heavy. She throws him a glance puzzled by his abrupt change in behavior. The path leads to a modest wooden hut under the quiet night sky, a peaceful refuge, where the weary traveler can finally rest. Tsurezure leaned back and stared at the ceiling while pondering the absurdity of his situation. Just 2 nights ago he was at a familiar campsite, and 1 night of sleep was enough to transport him to this strange world of monsters and elves. He is shocked that everyone here understands Japanese, and even his fluffy companion Fuda is considered a monster in this world. His thoughts again and again fly to the huge camper van he already hates, the vehicle he named Campy. Although the ability to spend points to unlock new features is definitely useful, the level logic underlying it still remains a mystery to him. He takes out his smartphone and scrolls to the photo taken on the day the van was delivered. Seeing himself standing by the dealer in front of the truck feels like it was an eternity ago, while the present reality sharply diverges from that memory. While he continues to study the photo, the light of the desk candle flickers and blinks. A strange, persistent feeling of anxiety begins to settle in his chest. He cannot shake the thought that something is wrong with the photograph, but he cannot understand what exactly. The burden of the day's events finally takes its toll. The eyelids grow heavier. Confusion and questions begin to merge into one until exhaustion prevails. Outside, the village sinks into deep silence under the starry sky. Deciding that further pondering at night is pointless, he finally gives in to sleep. The next morning he goes outside, stretching his body as the sun rises. Inside, in the little white owl, he leaves her curled up on the bidet, pure ball of fluff in the rays of morning light. He is heading to the camper van. It is already standing next to the wooden house, ready and waiting. The new day adds a sense of renewed meaning, even though the mysteries of this world still hang in the air. He starts the morning by checking the camper's status screen and is pleased to see the water and fuel tanks are fully filled. This confirms his theorized vehicle restores resources overnight, but his brow still furrows when he looks at the odometer. Only 70 kilometers traveled, and he realizes he is still far from the 1,000-kilometer mark needed for the next level. His eyes widen in surprise as he notices the changes on the display. His maintenance points have grown to 2. This discovery confuses him. He did not expect any progress without a corresponding increase in the overall vehicle level. Bending in the tight space, he quietly mumbles about the desire for the instruction manual to explain these cryptic mechanisms. He wonders where the new dots came from and thinks whether they were gained after he defeated the monsters yesterday, but still skeptically shakes his head. It was really Gina who fought. Suddenly he is interrupted by noise outside. He focuses on the window. He sees Gina, Martel, and the village guards gathered and bustling. Their voices rise in the morning air as they discuss something extremely important. He goes out to investigate and finds a pile of magical stones scattered on the ground near a large wooden box. The place leaves him speechless for a moment, tries to understand where these valuable things came from. He merges into the crowd of peasants, shields his eyes from the morning sun, and surveys the surroundings. The atmosphere is thick with wonder and confusion. Everyone is trying to understand what happened in the morning. His attention is cut off by a crowd. It parts, and an elderly woman named Yuru with a stone expression on her face approaches him. As soon as she appears, he immediately greets her and his voice is urgent, so he asks her opinion about the monsters that, according to rumors, were defeated earlier that very early hour. She stands before Martel, and Jin, her presence silences everyone as she delivers a shocking revelation. Martel's face pales with disbelief, and he asks if it could really be true that the young man is involved, while the elderly woman remains grim, offering no comfort. She brought icy news, but it was the elder who voiced the finality. He declared that the arena could no longer be saved and that there were no more options left. This news hits him like a physical blow. Thoughts rush immediately back to that young girl he had seen only recently, outside, according to the elder's words. The burden of heavy silence falls on the gathered peasants. A gloomy silence creeps through the group. He watches as the elder calls the disease Dirta disease, whose name seems to carry a dark history of the village, dating back to the times when Martel himself used it. Turning his gaze to Gina, he sees how the stoic warrior's composure cracks before his eyes. Her look reflects deep personal pain as the weight of what is happening finally sinks in. The explanation continues, revealing the cruel progression of the disease. First an insidious period without any symptoms, then a sudden violent onsetted rashes and high fever that take life in just 3 days. Martel, stunned by the news, stumbles. Her strength fails as others rush to her. While he desperately insists that the medicine might exist somewhere in a distant city, the elder immediately crushes this hope. 3 days' journey to Odorio is too long for the time left in the arena. He stands motionless, and the desperate voices of the peasants fade into a dull hum as he contemplates the impossible timeline and the tragedy approaches. He breaks the silence that suffocates. He steps forward and loudly calls Gina, his voice steady despite the surrounding despair, thereby sharply altering his resolve. He intercepts her attention, her eyes widen as she turns to him, and a momentary flash of hope or embarrassment appears on her face from his sudden intervention. Finding himself among the sad peasants and under the weight of their shared despair, he lowers his gaze. Variants are already racing through his mind while others freeze in sorrow. He forcibly makes himself focus, mentally organizing the facts. Dirt of disease, a deadly, world-bound ailment he has never heard of, and young Arena has already fallen into its rapid, fatal progression. Mathematics is cruel. To reach the town on horseback and return 3 days one way, so 6 in total. And the 2 days the arena has left her before the disease takes her clearly are not enough. Looking back at his companion and the small white owl, he realizes, since arriving in this world, he has traveled only about 70 kilometers, just a fraction of the distance needed to get the medicine. He estimates that the town halfway is about 240 kilometers from here, so the entire journey is almost 500 kilometers. For a horse, this is already impossible in the remaining time, but perhaps not for someone else. His thoughts return again to his modern transport. A full tank and a range of 500 kilometers, so he calculates. Even on a rough, unpaved road and at a slow pace, he can make it within 16-24 hours. Despite the promising numbers, he remains cautious, worried about fuel economy on these primitive paths and the very real possibility of encountering terrain that motorized transport simply cannot overcome. He weighs the grim possibilities and understands, due to the camper's high center of gravity, it easily overturns on uneven terrain. One mistake and the vehicle will fly off a cliff, ending immediately. Not only in the environment, the threat of monsters like Deke hangs nearby. He fears that a deadly encounter will leave him with nothing but regrets in his final moments. He seems burdened by the weight of the decision, his brows furrow, as he stares into the unknown road ahead. He finds a sharper awareness that pierces his fear. If he remains inactive and allows the arena to die, the pangs of conscience will be more unbearable than any physical danger. With sharp determination, he steps forward and declares to the gathering that he himself will go. His explosion of emotions stuns Gina and the village elders. On their faces are stone-like expressions of disbelief at his sudden proposal. He quickly outlines his proposal. He says that if someone who knows the route and the necessary medicine accompanies him, he can deliver the person to the city and return in record time. But even with this, Eben remains extremely skeptical and wonders how this could be possible when even the fastest horses cannot make this journey in time. Behind him looms the massive metal frame of his camper, a strange and powerful presence in the village forest clearing. Pressing his palm against the vehicle, he declares with unwavering confidence that with this machine, the impossible journey can be made. Preparation begins in earnest. Fingers slide into leather gloves and straps tighten with a series of sharp clicks. The gear is securely fastened for the road ahead. She steps forward with a determined look and offers her services as the expedition's guard. Gina insists she can handle any monsters they encounter alone, and this makes Shijido and Martel a bit more at ease. They both understand. An elf capable of using magic is an invaluable asset for the dangerous road to the city. He also decides to join, noting that his knowledge of the city Odorio and connections with local merchants will be extremely important. The elder explains, Grandmother Yoru will stay here to do everything in her power to keep Irina's conditions stable during their absence. The guard, Eben, voices the harsh truth of their situation. The medicine is too expensive. Even if they gather all the village's meager savings together, it will hardly be enough. The only hope is to sell every scrap of meat and hide to withstand the fierce Deke monster that Gina defeated the previous day. While the meat is being salted for transport, they discuss the logistics of the plan. A heavy uncertainty hangs in the air. They are troubled by whether the sale of the deke will really cover the costs and whether they can make the round trip and return with the medicine in 2 days at all. He proposes a radical alternative. They take Irina with them so she can receive the medicine as soon as they acquire it. But Eben hesitates. He knows that Shajido is not used to long trips, and a whole day in the carriage exhausts even a healthy adult, let alone a sick child. The man watches the amazing mechanical beast Shajido, brought into their world, carefully weighing the risks. If Irina is too weak, the journey itself could kill her before they reach the city. Now everything depends on how fast this monster can move. She rushes up with a basket of bread and cheese, bringing the supplies so needed on the road. Shajido thanks her as the group prepares to set off. They join hands as a group, understanding that if they do not leave immediately, the delay could cost Irina her life. He scans the village square with his gaze and does not understand where Gina disappeared to. The elder says, she went to make a final visit to Irina before departure, and he was left waiting by the supplies. In the quiet little house, she stands over the bed of a young girl. Irina's face is flushed and sweat appears on her temples. Her breathing quickens and becomes shallow. The fever takes its toll. The elf's expression is heavy. It mixes pity and determination as she looks at the exhausted child. Leaning closer, she whispers a solemn promise to the resting child, swearing to return with medicine that will save her life no matter the cost. In a moment, the morning silence is broken by the deep mechanical roar of the engine starting, announcing, the mission has begun. The huge white transport bursts forward, raising a cloud of dust as it leaves the safety of the village behind and begins its desperate journey into the unknown. It shakes wildly, and the metal frame groans as the wheels strike the uneven, unpaved ground of the wild land, testing the limits of the vehicle. Gripping the steering wheel, he sees, the road is getting worse and worse the farther they go, just as they move away from civilization. Beside him, the elf asks if the road will continue to narrow. He confirms her fears. The road is already harder than he expected. Behind them, the elder is already completely overcome, not by fear of the strange machine, but by a debilitating attack of seasickness. He slumps in his seat, his face pales, his eyes roll back, which surprises the driver. He did not expect the old man to suffer so much from the ride. He hunches over, his face pale, and tries hard to regain composure after the nauseating shaking. Gina asks if he is okay, hinting that fresh air would do him good, while Shajido watches from the driver's seat, worried that, despite the camper's capabilities, this broken road might be too much for the elder. Looking beyond the horizon, they see that the land ahead is even more treacherous. Jagged cliffs jut into the sky like broken teeth. The empty, boundless space presses in on the white vehicle, emphasizing their lonely road. Despite his discomfort, the elder points ahead to the road and explains that a wider path awaits further on. Shajido nods in response, accepting the advice and understands. Once they leave the vehicle, the ground becomes much more stable and manageable. Soon the journey resumes. The camper shakes and groans as it tramps over the rough terrain. Inside the cabin, the metal creaks against the rocky path, and that dull, constant sound reminds them each time of the harsh conditions they are pushing through. Suddenly, a small creature with long ears dashed across the road, barely missing the heavy tires. Its quick movement a brief flash of life in a completely barren wasteland. The pattern scattered. The wheel crashed into a deep rut and tore the frame with a sharp, brutal jerk. Shajido's eyes widened with anxiety, gripped the steering wheel tighter, and felt the vehicle losing its steady course. The giant body sways precariously to the side, about to fall. Inside, the cabin turns into continuous motion. Gina and the little owl lose their balance. Sudden fear freezes on their faces as the world outside the window tilts at a terrible angle. Desperately trying to stabilize them, Gina shouts for Shajido to activate the dome's protective membrane. He looks back at her. His face is full of confusion as he tries to comprehend her urgent command amid all this chaos. He grips the steering wheel tightly as the huge machine wildly pulls him to one side, threatening to overturn completely. Nearby, the elven warrior shouts in panic, her eyes wide open from the sudden horror of an almost disaster. In the depths of the hall, the elder is thrown by the force of the impact, and his voice joins the chorus of panic as the world tilts at an impossible angle. With a bone-breaking roar, the heavy machine breaks free and lands with a crash on the rocky ground. Its weight finally settles, and the suspension creaks under the load. Dust settles, and the warrior lowers her head in shame and abruptly apologizes for failing in the duty to scout the monsters that caused her to stumble. He immediately reassures her. Small creatures are almost impossible to notice under the huge body of the machine, and sincerely thanks her that they still survived and did not fall, remaining on their feet. Despite the calm words, he still becomes very exhausted from anxiety. He understands that even at a slow 20 km/h, a single mistake in driving can result in a deadly rollover on this treacherous terrain. Looking for a way out, He shifts his gaze to the flickering control panel interface and notices. He now has two options for system upgrades. He scrolls through the list of available functions from automatic repair to basic convenience and looks for something that guarantees their safety. His gaze lingers on the auto repair option, but the requirements to earn more points remain a mystery. He knows. He must first ensure the immediate survival of everyone on board, especially the young Arena. Half a battle with steady hand movement chooses the center of gravity stability function, hoping that this will be enough to keep them on the ground. Immediately, a confirmation message flashes on the screen. The new system is active. Now the transport will automatically adjust balance in real time, providing critical protection against the deadly threat of overturning. He presses the gas pedal firmly with his full weight, and the engine in the cabin responds with a powerful, springy rhythmic roar. The sudden surge of power confuses the comrades. Their eyes widen as the car is about to move forward. When they turned on the new stabilization, the massive white motorhome tears through the uneven ground. The wheels spin mud and rush stubbornly, steadily, without any swaying. Noticing the changes, the elf warrior remarks that the ride has become amazingly smooth. Nodding in agreement, he is confident that now this stability will allow them to cover more distance in less time. Despite the progress, she remains attentive. She notices the same intense concentration he showed when pushing the vehicle's internal systems. She voices her concern whether he is taking on too much and overloading the machine. He meets her with a reassuring smile and explains that he is not trying to overstep boundaries. He insists. Both he and the transport are simply doing everything possible to save the young girl Irina, reflecting the same dedication she has already shown. The journey continues relentlessly. Only the transport, a white flash amid the gray mist, paves the way through the endless harsh wilderness under the open sky. At the back, the village elder leans forward to join the conversation as they overcome a too rocky section of the path. The elders suggest maintaining this pace for some more time, and he replies that they have already been on the road for 10 hours and are currently moving within the best estimated arrival time. She adds a warning. Monsters always cause trouble, so the most important thing is to reach the safety of the city before darkness falls. She watches him closely, noticing how the hard road has settled on his exhausted, worn-out face. She expresses deep concern. She realizes she should have noticed his fatigue earlier. Since early morning, she has been leading him along these unfamiliar, broken roads and it has clearly drained all his mental energy. She insists they need to stop immediately and take a break. Even the senior agrees. They say everyone should rest and eat, but the driver remains adamant. He insists that without him the transport will not move, and due to the uncertainty ahead, they cannot afford to waste a single minute. He sincerely thanks the young man for everything he did, acknowledging that it was an age-old problem of the village and had nothing to do with him personally. He continues, assuring the tired traveler that even if everything goes wrong as he hoped, no one in the village will have any idea to blame him for the outcome. The boy rejects the very idea of defeat. He could not live with himself if anything happened to Irina, her family, or the rest of the village. Their suffering is a burden he refuses to bear. Looking at the cart that brought them so far, he wondered what kind villagers they had been to him. He believed that the true purpose of this machine was to bring joy to people, and that is why he must keep pushing forward. He says he wants everyone to be able to smile again. The elder finally seems to give in and promises to do everything he can, but warns, do not overwork yourself, the medicine will be useless if something happens to the one who carries it. He grips the steering wheel, his face frozen in determination despite the fatigue. Behind, Gina swears to support him. If he reaches the limit, she will carry both him and the elder for the rest of the way. He only nods, looks at the road, and agrees that they must not allow such a disaster. The heavy machine roars, flying over the barren wasteland, raising dust as it presses on into the unknown. When the sun sinks below the horizon, the sky turns into a canvas of deep purples, and gray shades, a sign that a long, hard night is at the threshold. Under the cover of night, the young driver checks the map, irritated that the navigator shows only places he has already been. Nearby, the elven warrior watches. Thick clouds have swallowed the stars, so they have no celestial landmarks left, and the headlights barely pierce the heavy darkness. He turns to the elder and asks if the map will help find the city, but the old man explains. Maps are a rare tool for merchants and pilgrims. For most, the path is etched in memory and recognized by familiar landmarks, but now they are covered by night. The burden of the road begins to weigh down. His eyes narrow as he realizes they have been on the road for 14 hours, much longer than his most pessimistic estimates. He knows they cannot wait for dawn. The urgency of their mission allows no delay. Suddenly, a small white owl flinches, beats its wings forcefully against the air, and rises up right inside the cramped cabin. Both he and the warrior freeze in stunned silence as the creature prepares to move. The bird bursts out of the vehicle like a whirlwind, its feathers glowing with bright light that leads through the darkness. It becomes a beacon and a void, paving the way through the roadless night. It let out a sharp, urgent cry, and its bioluminescent glow intensified as it circled above the transport. Gina's eyes widened sharply with insight, and she quickly turned to Shigeto, asking permission to climb onto the roof to get a better view of the path ahead. Without waiting for a formal response, she flew up together with elven grace and landed firmly on the camper roof. High above them, a white owl continued to lead the way through the darkening sky, as if cutting through the gloom. From the new height, the horizon finally gave a ray of hope. The distant trembling lights of the small town, hidden among the hills, a beacon of civilization in this endless wild wasteland. She screamed with joy, her face lit up as soon as she confirmed that the town lights could finally be seen, and she urged the group forward, driving the energy again. Inside the hut, Shigeto squinted into the darkness, saw only shadows. The elder calmly explained, "An elf's vision is much better than a human's, and the stepping sensations are even more amazing. They allow one to navigate where others go blind." Having assured this, Gina added that she and the owl would provide landmarks and warn of any obstacles on their path, so that Shigeto could fully concentrate on how to navigate the difficult terrain. The car rumbled, cutting through the darkness with its headlights and thudding over the uneven ground. Shigeto gripped the steering wheel tightly, gathering himself. Agency were just one last push away from reaching their goal. Finally, massive wooden city gates towered before them, guarded by sentries standing on the walls. The tired travelers gathered in groups near the entrance. The long road through the night had come to its end. He looks exhausted, yet relieved. The group finally reaches their destination. The village elder Libido does not hide his genuine surprise. They managed to get to Adrio in one day, even though the journey stretched to 15 grueling hours. Gina, noticing his fatigue, asks if he is holding up okay. He assures her that he is fine but admits, as soon as they can trade Deke remains for some currency, he will rest immediately. At the entrance to the town, they are stopped by a guard for inspection. Libido steps forward and presents a formal pass issued by the village authorities to confirm the purpose of their business. The guard explains the procedure. All weapons must be accounted for, and any trade transactions will be taxed depending on the specific goods. The professional restraint of the guard suddenly disappears as soon as his gaze falls on a small white creature sitting on the young man's shoulder. He gasps sharply, not believing his own eyes. It is the legendary forest owl. It is considered a creature that brings incredible luck to anyone fortunate enough to see it. The guard exclaims that this almost never happens near human settlements, and because of this, the group remains impressed by how much the owl commands respect. As soon as they are allowed entry, the group heads through quiet streets to the trade guild. Libido leads the way, eager to quickly turn that deep carcass into the funds they so desperately need. As they walk, the young man reflects on how much his feathered companion has become a local celebrity, while the owl, quietly carefree, lets out a soft woohoo. Their progress is abruptly stopped by heavy wooden doors. A small narrow slit slides open and a pair of indifferent eyes peek out. A voice from inside dryly informs that the establishment's working hours ended long ago. But despite the urgency of the mission, the clerk stubbornly insists. Let them come back tomorrow, and he is absolutely uninterested in their plight. Despair grows as he pleads with the unseen clerk, emphasizing that someone's life hangs in the balance right now. His request is like talking to a wall. Outside, someone remains cold and indifferent, as if it doesn't matter whether he asks for death or salvation. Behind him, comrades watch the scene, anxiety only increasing, and they understand. The bureaucracy of this city may become their greatest obstacle. Realizing that standard requests won't suffice, he turns his gaze to the elven warrior standing nearby. Calmly and decisively, he asks if she will agree to help him with a specific task. The village elder stands before the closed shop doors, and the silence of the night falls like a heavy burden as he waits for an answer. He leans toward the small service window. His voice is broken. In a pleading tone, he demands the shop be opened, insisting they cannot wait until dawn. From inside, the merchant responds with slight irritation. Such a hasty matter should have been resolved during the day. The exchange is cut short by a sudden pause when dazzling joy bursts from the elder, casting long, sharp shadows on the wooden walls and leaving both men wide-eyed in shock. From the light, as if from the heart, descends a figure calm and almost ethereal, her silhouette distinguished by a flickering glow, and a small white owl perches on her head. She lands and immediately strikes a majestic theatrical pose. Her voice thunders with authority as she proclaims herself the chosen elf and divine messenger of the great forest owl. Continuing her dramatic speech, she explains that she has traveled an incredibly long distance to save the people of this town and demands that the merchant buy what she has brought to support their cause. Caught up in the spectacle, the old man turns back to the window and shouts for the doors to be opened immediately while Tsurezure watches the elf's performance, mixing admiration with a bit of awkward embarrassment. The heavy doors finally creak piercingly and open. When the merchant steps out to ask where exactly the goods are, the elf points to a large metal carriage which begins to hum and glow with strange swirling energy. He freezes in amazement as right before him, with a clatter of bones, a huge pile of supplies instantly appears, crates, barrels, and sacks. The volume of this trophy is impressive, much larger than he had expected from a single delivery. He instantly rushes into battle, shouting to his mercenary assistants who live Tsurezure to wake everyone up and immediately start inspecting the goods. Gina, still holding the roll with the white owl bird on her shoulder, politely thanks him, and Tsurezure quietly apologizes for the sudden burden. By urgent order, the team comes to life. Workers take on exhausting labor weighing and sorting the catch. They drag heavy carcasses and barrels, and the air fills with the sounds of work as they process the meat and materials brought from the forest. While the work continues, the dealer explains to the senior, even if his entire team works at full capacity, completing the assessment will take at least 2 hours. The senior acknowledges the delay and understands the scale of what they have entrusted to him. While they discuss logistics, the elder's attention suddenly fixes on Tsurezure. He has turned pale and is standing unsteadily. The elder asks if he can request an advance for medicine, noticing the young man is getting worse. Suddenly the tension becomes unbearable and he falls face down onto the hard ground. Gina and the elder shout in fright, rush to him because he lies motionless, and the suddenness of the fall instantly drives them mad with panic. She immediately falls to her knees, presses his head to herself, and in panic asks if he hears her, if he is not nauseous. Her voice falters with anxiety as she calls for someone to bring water. Her usual restraint crumbles from his sudden collapse. Despite her desperate pleas, he remains indifferent. His eyes are closed and he slowly sinks into a deep, quiet unconsciousness. Only one thing remains: she's shallow, even breathing. The rest freezes in tense silence, waiting for any sign of regaining consciousness. He remains motionless in the elf's hands, eyes closed, sleep deep and heavy. The village elder approaches. Anxiety is visible on his face. He looks at the young man and sees his condition. After a brief check, the elder decides it is simply exhaustion, a natural consequence of all the day's trials. The elder, thoughtfully touching his beard, intently examines her unconscious companion, while the warrior woman looks down with focused concern, and a protective instinct, their eyebrows twitching into a single crease. Breaking the silence, the old woman is ordered to take the sleeping man to the resting place near the city entrance. She explains that she will go to the pharmacy alone next, armed with detailed notes that Granny Yoru left about the necessary medicines and symptoms of the young girl. At first, he hesitated to leave her side, but then nodded, understanding. With astonishing ease, she throws the man over her shoulder. Strength contradicts her delicate stature. She declares that she intends to settle him, and the elder, watching them walk away, is quite surprised by her physical strength. Night falls on the quiet settlement. Dark silhouettes of buildings stand out against the endless starry sky. Under the same canopy of the starry sky, his eyelids slowly flutter and his eyes open. The world blurs with dark silhouettes and distant light as consciousness returns. When the gaze clears, her face appears above him. The outline of tense anxiety fades, and in place of her look is a soft, relieved smile. She exhales with relief, realizing that he has finally returned to them. He finds himself comfortably settled on a wooden cart under a thick blanket, looks up at his companion, and weakly asks where they are now, still confused after that sudden fall. He opens his eyes and sees something that makes him shudder, lying comfortably on Gina's lap. The realization hits him like a physical slap. His face twists in pure shock, and he stares at her with a look full of disbelief. Suddenly jumping to his feet, he grabs his head in wild panic. Thoughts race, trying to piece together fragments of memories about their arrival and strange events in the shop. A sudden jerk knocks the air out of him and he completely loses his bearings. When the initial shock passes, he tremulously apologizes, thanks her for her patience, and for allowing him to use her knees as a pillow. She only nods, confirming that he really lay unconscious for quite some time. The weight of what happened reaches him, groans, and hides his face in his hands, until a wave of burning shame covers him. He compares this feeling to how his subordinates carry him home after a night of excess. She only quietly giggles, urging him to throw it out of his head. Reaching for his device, he freezes in shock. While he was unconscious, 3 full hours passed. Nearby, a small white owl watches him intently, eyes wide open and unblinking, until he realizes that time has disappeared. His concern immediately shifts to the village elder. He asks why the old man allowed himself to go to the pharmacy alone at such a time. He suggests catching up with him, but she, downcast, admits that before the elder left, she did not ask for the exact location of the shop. She quietly insists, let him stay seated and continue recovering until the elder returns, and says there is no point in rushing now. He lowers his gaze, a cloud of guilt on his face for succumbing to exhaustion precisely when his help was needed most. While he watches her, he feels a hidden tension in her posture. Understands. She is just as anxious about Irina's condition as he is. A heavy premonition overwhelms him, and this weight makes it even more unbearable. Her firm persistence stops him when she says, "Do not dismiss your own contributions." She emphasizes that without his help, any aid to their satellite as well as to themselves would not have even reached this city, let alone found a way to help. In response, he remains modest. He says it is still too early to thank because the young Irina has not even received the medicine yet. But she is deeply moved and sincerely thanks him for everything he has done for them so far. Her face grows dim in quiet, sad reflection as she recalls a painful memory from the past. She says, when her own mother fell ill with adult disease, she was completely powerlessly able to sit and watch in tears as her mother's life faded. She, carefully watching his reaction, explains. As soon as she heard that Irina had caught the same illness, she again felt an irreversible despair overwhelm her. She was afraid that this time she would again fail to do something to change the tragic end. But now everything is different. Sitting with her back to him, she admits, having borrowed his strength, they did manage to reach this city for medicine and finally got a chance to really help the girl. This realization brought her deep relief and hope, something she had not felt for a very long time. She turns to him with a glow in her tears and a radiant, trembling smile as if his presence had saved her heart. He remains looking back, stunned by the depth of her gratitude and the wild, bare emotion in her voice. Slightly confused by her passionate words of thanks, he stands up and shakes off the lingering sleepiness with a sharp, decisive exclamation, stretches his arms preparing for the tasks ahead, while she looks at him gently with tender gratitude. With a sense of urgency, he approaches the village elder, quickly apologizes for the delay, and immediately asks about the medicines they so desperately need. The elder, relieved to see he has woken up, greets him warmly. Carefully watching him, the elder raises a small precious vial and explains that thanks to the influence of Granny Yoru they were able to obtain the medicine without any complications. Gina stands nearby and watches as her face warms slightly. The weight of their mission finally becomes somewhat lighter. He continues to spread the rumor about the old woman, noting that she is a legendary figure in the medical community of this town, saying that it was enough to show her introductory letter for the local pharmacists to agree to get the medicine even in the dead of night. This shocks the young man so much. The one he considered just a mystic actually had such professional authority. With the medicines finally in hand, the group returns to their gigantic iron wagon. It looms like a beacon amid the desolate, wind-swept landscape of frozen ice. Settles into the driver's seat. He prepares for the long road back, and outside the window is complete darkness without a single recognizable landmark. Gina says aloud that they cannot cross such an empty field, but he remains composed, confident they will find a way through this darkness. As soon as he turns on the controls, a glowing map flashes and flickers on the dashboard. Its thin lines trace a path through the surrounding forest and hills, while the navigation system boots up. While they prepare to hit the road, the elder shudders upon hearing the little white owl speak in a human voice. The driver quickly explains, this creature has a unique ability to remember any place it has ever been and unfailingly serves as a guide for their way back. Despite his concern that the driver hasn't rested enough, the young man stubbornly insists on moving forward and orders his companions to watch for monsters lurking in the shadows. After the last nod of understanding, he grabs the steering wheel, ready to push through the night to deliver the medicine. He reassures his companions, laughing and brushing off exhaustion with a mention of his former life as a corporate slave. And the elder still cannot grasp the strange term, so Gina watches him with a hint of curiosity and anxiety, marveling at how he can stay so lively after this long journey. His gaze remains fixed on the road ahead as the clock on the panel ticks past 2 a.m. Having driven for 18 hours without breaks, he counts their progress and knows, as long as no trouble occurs, they will arrive right on time. The truck rumbles heavily through the darkness, and the headlights carve a lonely path through the silence of the wild wilderness. Slowly, the oppressive inky darkness of night begins to seep into soft gray and pink hues of dawn, revealing a torn, alien landscape of towering rock formations. When the first light of morning floods the cabin, Gina notices dawn has finally come. Better visibility urges him to speed up, and she silently hopes their current acceleration will be enough to arrive on time. But on the little guide, it is visible, the toll of the road. One can discern the lies scattered on the panel, indifferent and motionless. His energy is completely exhausted. They look down at the little owl, worried by its sudden silence and lack of movement. Their concern for their friend is interrupted by sudden movement outside. He tenses, eyes wide open, and quietly wonders if a monster has appeared, blocking their path through the past. Ahead loom two huge dark masses like torn teeth against the morning sky. He freezes, staring through the glass, and his face hardens as it becomes clear the obstacle is truly close. He grabs the steering wheel and squints, looking toward the horizon where a thick cloud of dust begins to rise. He asks Gina what she can see from her place, sensing that trouble has occurred somewhere far away. A dust cloud coils over the deserted landscape, and torn rocky outcrops like teeth jut against the sky. She leans forward, and her eyes widen as soon as she recognizes the source of the commotion. A huge herd of monsters is rushing straight at them. She jumps up and urgently warns the group. A charge is approaching, followed by a crush. The ground trembles under the weight of Black Bull's monsters with many eyes and tusked horns, charging forward in a mad, relentless frenzy. Gina calls them a deadly threat when they gather in such numbers and explains, if you get under their feet it's the end. In response, Tsurezure decides to steer the vehicle to higher ground so the crowd will rush past and everyone will pass safely. Suddenly, a small white owl lets out a piercing cry, its wings flapping wildly, and it warns the pair of the imminent danger about to come. He quickly thanks the creature for the warning, adjusts the course, acknowledging the owl's sharp hearing and that it keeps them safe. However, as she watches the crush, a chilling realization overwhelms her. The monsters are not attacking, they are panicked, fleeing from something even more terrible lurking just behind them. She watches as a giant column of dust bursts from the valley, as if the earth itself is screaming under the weight of the approaching tsunami. Shoulder to shoulder with the swirling cloud, the Black Bulls gallop in desperate frenzy, their predatory instincts replaced by pure, unspoiled fear. Staring into the chaos, she signals to the others something massive is trailing the herd. Its size far exceeds anything they have ever faced. A cold suspicion washes over her completely. Even climbing higher will not be enough to escape such a threat. From their precarious height, the RV seems like just a toy against the backdrop of the impending destruction. Inside the vehicle, he grips the steering wheel with trembling hands, his face carved with fear and iron determination. He reminds himself of the distance they have already covered and that their lives depend on him. He vows to get the medicine and return alive despite some monster on their heels. The valley trembles when the lonely transport rushes through the narrow pass behind it. A wall of dust rises and the echo of a giant threat thunders. In the cabin, he grips the seat. His eyes wide with horror, and the ground behind him explodes with a series of violent tremors threatening to devour the road. From the sudden impact, he freezes in shock and watches in disbelief as a huge beast with many eyes tears away from the wreckage with a deafening roar. Muttering uncontrollably whether the creature supposedly defeated by Gina has somehow returned from the dead. The elder quickly silences him, explaining that this is a completely different specimen, and adds that mutavora are usually solitary and territorial creatures, so such a consistent appearance is extremely unusual. While the vehicle speeds in desperate flight, he manages to see through the rear window something that makes him freeze. His thoughts frantically search for an escape, while a small owlet silently watches. He freezes in shock as she moves to the back of the bus. Her hand rests on the blade, and she warns that the creature's lunge will soon overwhelm them, insisting on staying behind to delay the pursuit. He immediately protests, his voice boiling with concern, because she will be left alone against such circumstances. The elder speaks of a possible detour that will force them to retreat and turn back. Despite his pleas, she resolutely stands against the looming wall of monstrous bulls and the towering giant, drawing her sword, calling him to witness her victory, and swearing that she will not be defeated. She urges him on, forcing him to hurry. Her voice cuts sharply as she warns, the Black Bulls are drawing closer. Inside the crew compartment, he grips the steering wheel, sweat floods his forehead, and the device clicks, marking their current coordinates for a future return. He looks back through the rear window. His face shows a desperate promise that he will come back for her. The engine roars and the distance between them mercilessly grows, leaving her a solitary figure against the vast, dangerous landscape. She gives a quiet, calm smile, accepting the burden of her choice. The ground shakes beneath her as the heavy vehicle accelerates, and the air fills with dust as she flees from inevitable death. She stands firm, the wind whips her hair into a golden scarf around her determined gaze. A gigantic, clumsy form of mutavora looms over her. It is Ma Gape, and smaller, many-hoofed Black Bulls gather around. Undeterred, she draws her blade with only spark of defiance against the encroaching shadow. Meanwhile, the bus flies down the uneven mountain path, and the suspension groans from the mad escape at speed. He stared motionless at the road ahead. His fingers clenched so tightly on the steering wheel they turned white. He was struggling with guilt for leaving his comrade behind. He calls to the elder and apologizes for the shaking, but his voice is tense. He knows that speed is their only chance. Behind, the elder is jerked wildly by the violent jolts, and the little white owl clings with its claws, watching their mad flight. He grips the steering wheel tightly while his thoughts race. Gina stands alone against the monsters. Every passing second stretches into eternity and knows she risks everything to buy them time. A heavy machine roars, rushing across the desert plains and tearing through space so fast that no horse can catch Yuku, and it also raises a huge cloud of dust. When the sun sets beyond the horizon, the bright colors of twilight spread into the deep, starless darkness of the night. This is how time is counted by the escape made in desperate haste. In the quiet village, torches flicker in the darkness, and sentries from the height of wooden towers wearily guard the silence, unaware of the mechanical beast approaching. These two beams of light, like blades, cut through the shadows of the Valathi, announce the return of the travelers long before the sound of the engine reaches the village gates. The guards squint into the distance, trying to understand whether these glowing orbs are the eyes of some strange servant belonging to Lord Shichito. Distrust turns into wild excitement when they realize the impossible has happened. The band really returned from the distant land of Odorio overnight. He gets out of the car together with the elder, who immediately calls Granny Euro. The villagers gather, saying that they take care of the arena at home, although its condition was so critical that they feared it would not survive the night. Fortunately, the medicine arrived on time. She watches intently as Granny Yuru works at a practical speed. Her hands are firm as she grinds rare herbs into a fine powder. The rhythmic rustling of the mortar and pestle is the only sound in the tense room until she carefully pours the mixture into a glass. When the medicine was ready, she and the older woman carefully helped the sick girl and urged her to swallow the bitter liquid. Irina, whose face was covered with dark feverish spots, drinks weakly as if with each shallow breath her life force fades. Outside the small hut, the night silence is broken only by the faint whisper of the inhabitants gathered in the darkness. They peer through the windows and crowd near the doors, their faces a mix of fear and desperate hope for the child inside. Turning back to the bed, the girl is still breathing heavily. Her skin shines with cold sweat as the illness carves her fragile body. But almost imperceptibly, the convulsive rises and falls of her chest become more even, and the tension of pain in her features begins to ease. Noticing changes in her, the elder leans forward. His scarred hand reaches out to check her temperature. He watches every movement intently, holding his breath in hope for a sign that the treatment has already worked. He is silent for a long time, not averting his gaze from her eyes, and quietly raises his eyelid to check how clear his vision is. Behind him, a young man stands frozen, eyes wide, and in his gaze a silent plea for good news. Finally, the elder returns to the door and announces that the medicine worked. His voice sounds as if deep relief is spreading through it. His words immediately trigger an outburst of joy in the crowd outside. Shouts and cries roll through the village like an echo. Smiles and loud cheers during the celebration. The young man lets out a long, trembling sigh. Finally, the responsibility lifts off his shoulders like a heavy burden. Nearby, the old woman who prepared the medicine can no longer hold back. She covers her face and cries with relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. He freezes with sudden, sharp determination, his gaze fixed on a target only he can see. Without saying a word, he dashed past the guards, and his shoes kicked up dust as he raced to his car. Even in Belk watch him go, their confusion only grows. They realize that Gina has also disappeared. She was supposed to be by the bed, but she is nowhere to be found. The noise pulls the elder outside. The guards quickly report strange disappearances, while others try to maintain the silence needed to restore the arena. The elder's face darkens with a heavy secret, and he ignores the bustling whispers of the villagers, who mistake his gloomy silence for a sudden illness. He watches the trail of dust left by the bus that drove away, silently entrusting the safety of the missing warrior to the man who just flew past. Far from the village, a heavy rain washes away the carcass of the fallen beast, and the silence of the forest is broken only by the rhythmic rumble of the downpour. In the raging storm, Tsurezure stands by his car, pressing the lifeless, rain-soaked body of Gina to his chest. He successfully returned her to the safety of the bus, standing still amid the relentless rain pouring from the forest. Inside the vehicle, her eyelids flutter, her eyes open, and the haze of unconsciousness slowly recedes, revealing dirt and bruises painting her face. Seeing her move, he leans over her with a gentle smile, his face showing deep relief she has finally regained consciousness. She suddenly sits up in panic, her voice trembling as she calls his name. The sharp movement makes her wince. He quickly asks her to remain still, and says that although he managed to provide some basic first aid, her body is still covered with wounds from the fight. The first thing she thinks of is the little girl, but he reassures her. Everyone is safe inside the trailer, and he offers warm soup to chase away the cold from the storm. He confirms that the medicine reached its destination, and that Arena is out of danger. This makes her break down in tears of pure gratitude and relief. Noticing the oversized shirt she now wears, she listens carefully as he quietly, embarrassedly explains. He had to take off her wet cloak and dry her. Handing her his own clothes to warm her, he still worries about their sin. She looks at him with a gentle, tired smile, shows deep gratitude that he came to find her. He nods, his gaze soft as he says that it is finally time for them to head back to Harkham Village, where everyone awaits their return with eager anticipation and anxiety. With the decision made, he grabs the steering wheel and the heavy vehicle moves through the cracked terrain. The engine hums steadily as they drive away from the battlefield and stretch toward the horizon. When the bus approaches the village gates, a small crowd has already gathered on the road in anticipation. Among them are the village elders and a young girl, all watching the road, holding their breath. She sits in the crowd, eyes wide open, hope and distrust mixed in them, as the familiar transport finally appears in sight. The burden of the recent ordeal seems to hang in the air while she waits for at least one glance at her savior. The bus finally dies down and creaks, kicking up a small cloud of dust. He looks out from the driver's seat, and the full weight of the moment is reflected in his face as the doors begin to hiss and open slowly. He carefully helps the wounded elf woman step down. Her body is still wrapped in thick bandages. Seeing this, the young girl tries to get up, but the elders quickly catch her, warning that she is still too weak to stand on her own. Ignoring protests and her own physical weakness, she stumbles forward, her legs trembling under the weight. Driven by pure emotions, she falls to the ground in a desperate attempt to reach the one who risked everything for her. Seeing her determination is a shock to everyone around. Surprise and anxiety are frozen on their faces. He silently watches as the bond between the two survivors overcomes their physical pain, and this is a gentle return to the safety of the village. She stretches out her hand, and her small palm trembles as she firmly grasps the wooden handrails to lean on. Next to her stands a warrior woman, tall. Her silhouette stands out against the bright sky, but her posture reveals hidden deep fatigue. Her boots press firmly into the mud, rooting her in place as she prepares for the emotional weight of this moment. The two finally come together in desperate embraces. Tears flow down their faces, and the tension of the entire ordeal subsides. Nearby, villagers silently watch, mixed with feelings of relief and pity, for they see the physical toll this road takes on their defenders. Suddenly, the warrior's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, not letting go of the little girl in her arms. Tsurezure gasped in alarm and reached forward as soon as he saw that her strength had finally run out. She gives a weak, exhausted smile. She closes her eyelids and whispers that relief has come in a wave, but her body no longer has the strength to stay upright. Tsurezure looks around and notices that the village elder has already informed him about their reckless actions. He insists on treating the wounds first, while telling the young girl to get off her bed immediately, but she stubbornly and playfully resists and stubbornly goes her own way. When the peasants begin to help the exhausted couple, he stands beside the elderly man and with a quiet, focused expression watches everything, knowing the immediate danger has passed, but the path to recovery is only beginning. He stands before the village elder, who bows his head in deep gratitude. The old man acknowledges the tremendous efforts and trials he endured for their sake, and says that words alone cannot express his thanks. Retelling his humble story further, the elder with a heavy heart admits, "There is nothing valuable left in the village to give as a reward. They were forced to sell everything, Jevin, the livestock, to survive those recent trials." In response, the young man gives a gentle smile. A small white owl settled on his shoulder sits calmly and contentedly. He says that for both him and his companion, the joy of the peasant is the only reward they need. He looks at the community and sees relief on the faces of those they saved. The little arena girl, the restored elf Gina, and others. For him, their safety and the return of smiles are far more valuable than any material treasures. The elder lets out a quiet, grateful chuckle, is impressed by the young man's dedication. He says that he truly has a relaxed heart, a rare trait that brings peace to everyone around. The term catches him by surprise, freezes, and contemplates the weight of this word. He recalls how in his own memories such a phrase was often thrown as a reproach to his generation. But here it is presented as the highest praise. Shaking off a brief moment of self-analysis, he feels a new thought being born in his mind. Turning to the elder, he voiced a modest request if they might have some extra old clothes he could use. Nearby, he and his fluffy companion stood patiently, ready to move on to the next task. He explains that during his travels his clothes got very dirty and he has no spare ones, so he would be grateful for a replacement. The elder nods, understands, assures that finding suitable attire is a simple matter. He hurries to thank him. Then the young man says there is one more thing he would like to find out. Hesitating slightly, he asks a strange question. Have there ever been rumors that someone suddenly appears as if from another world or disappears without a trace? This question makes the old man fall silent. His eyes widen as he comprehends the weight of these words. Feeling the pressure of silence, the traveler quickly tries to brush off the topic, as if it doesn't matter at all. But the elder keeps a focused gaze precisely on this. The elder leans closer. His face becomes solemn as he directly asks if it is true that the man standing before him is a visitor from another world. Stunned by the precision of the question, he can only silently stare back, while the truth hangs like a heavy burden in the air between them. The morning sun illuminates a sturdy wooden building at the forest edge. Outside silence, though inside a conversation is about to buzz, on which everything depends. Inside, among the shelves of ancient texts, the village elder sits upright at the table, greeting the appearance of his guest with a calm, friendly gaze. He notes that the new clothes fit perfectly, so the young man immediately expresses sincere gratitude for the outfit being delivered to his temporary residence. In freshly donned clothes, the traveler stands upright and does not waste time showing that he wants to continue the conversation where it was interrupted yesterday. The elder freezes for a moment. His face hardens, and he asks an unexpected question whether his guest really came from another world. When the young man confirms this, the old man is only amazed that the legend turned out to be true. Noticing the exhaustion carved on the guest's face, the elders suggest postponing further talks until tomorrow and strongly advise him to finally get some sleep after 2 sleepless nights. He desperately needs it. In the room, silence stretches heavily while 2 men stand in a quiet office. The weight of their shared revelation hangs between them in the air. He was curious about how his secret was revealed. The traveler asks for explanations, and the elder begins to tell an ancient legend. When the flow of the earth's veins is disturbed, those who come from distant worlds often get lost and wander in this land. He listens attentively as the elder begins to talk about the movement of the earth, vein the primary source of magical energy that circulates throughout the world. This flow, explains the elder, is the life force for those who possess magic, and for monsters that roam the earth. And influencing even the air they breathe is like a river. It can become calm or suddenly break free and rebel. Only in extremely rare cases does this stream go so wildly off course that it creates anomalies twisting the very fabric of space, turning it into swirling vortices. The youth's eyes widen when the elder says that these distortions can flip a bridge between different worlds, thus appearing what is called another world or cross. Taking a moment to collect himself, the old man lets out a heavy sigh. The burden of what is happening is etched into the wrinkles around his mouth. He points out that the recent chaos, the sudden appearances of creatures like Deke and the giant Mutavora on the streets, are a direct consequence of the earth vein flow being extremely out of balance. Looking back at the silhouettes of the village guards, the elder admits, once he thought that stories about other worlds were just fairy tales. But seeing Tsurejure's black hair and his unusual clothes, they can no longer disbelieve it. Tsurezure nods, confirming that he really came from another world. He just arrived here literally out of nowhere, having fallen asleep in his transport. He explains that in his world there were neither monsters nor magic, not even people like Gina. And the little white owl, he clarifies, is not considered a real monster there either. Despite all these huge differences, he is surprised that they can still understand each other's language. Continuing his story, he admits, as soon as he found himself in this realm, he somehow gained abilities that truthfully are impossible. The elder listens carefully, agreeing that such powers which defy common sense and even the senses themselves are truly incredible. And he thinks, it will be increasingly difficult to maintain the appearance that he is just a monster. His gaze falls downward, a heavy silence settles between them, as he prepares to ask the question that has been gnawing at him from within. Staring intently at the old man and trembling with despair, he confesses a deep desire to return to his own world. And he asks, is there any known way or someone with knowledge to help him find the way back? In response, the elder closes his eyes and his face softens with pity. He says that the legends he spoke of are ancient and their origins are shrouded in mystery. Bowing his head, he apologizes and admits he does not know any way to bring him back, and even as despair is about to overwhelm him, his hand clenches as if in a desperate struggle against a situation that seems hopeless. Outside, the village continues to be enveloped in pastoral silence. The inhabitants go about their daily tasks, unaware of how deeply the conversation taking place somewhere inside is nesting in the air. Breaking this gloomy silence, the elder offers a possible lead. He recalls rumors about researchers scattered around the world who dedicate their lives to searching for connections between the distortions of the Earth's veins and other worlds. These words catch him off guard, a spark of renewed hope flashes in his eyes. He listens attentively as the elder continues his instructions. The old man advises, If Tsurezure travels to large cities or sacred pilgrimage sites where crowds gather, he will eventually come across the researchers he seeks or find the necessary information. This advice leaves him deep in thought as he weighs the reality of a global journey. Even with the camper's incredible abilities to travel the world full of monsters, it will be exhausting and dangerous. Yet even then, finding the way home remains a distant hope. While he continues to lose himself in his thoughts, Gina approaches to check if everything is all right. He immediately asks if she is hurt, but she brushes off his concern with a smile. She says she only feels a slight pain, and before he can ask more, she inquires what has thrown him off so much. They settle by a wooden fence out in the open. Nearby, while they talk, sits a small white owl. He confesses. His thoughts have once again drifted to his homeland, Japan, and honestly admits there is much he still wants to achieve if he ever finds the way back. Then he explains the original purpose of his efforts. He admits he worked tirelessly to acquire the camper precisely to happily lead a quiet, measured life on the road with friends. He lowers his gaze, his voice carrying both nostalgia and uncertainty about what lies ahead. In response, her face lights up with a radiant, sincere smile. She finds something truly wonderful in this journey. Her enthusiasm breaks through his gloomy mood. They look at the rolling hills. She recalls her own experience and admits, at first the strange transport was frightening, but over time she learned to appreciate its conveniences. She agrees that traveling together sheltered from bad weather and having a safe place to rest looks like a wonderful adventure. She leans toward him, and in her gaze is renewed energy and determination. Cheerfully exclaiming, she insists, they must do everything necessary for him to return home, fully devoted to his cause. Suddenly she wants with all her heart to go with him, her voice quiet but firm. He nervously snorts, admitting he would like that, but the way back to his world remains a terribly mysterious puzzle. Her eyes flash with genuine excitement as she declares that she wants to see his homeland with her own eyes. Even the thought of such an impossible journey does not dampen her mood at all. Her enthusiasm briefly throws him off balance. His gaze softens as he contemplates her words. A warm hand reaches out to him, a silent gesture of support amid his uncertainty. A new realization slowly grows within him. If the way back to his world exists, then perhaps there is also a way to return here. From the thought of a bridge between these two lives, a quiet hope rises within him, just beginning to take shape. Watching her play with a small fluffy owlet, he allows himself to imagine a future where he can invite them both into his own world. He knows, such thoughts are overly optimistic and the odds have not been in his favor, yet he cannot help but wonder. Just the very thought that he might share his home with new friends barely brings a smile to his lips. Worthwhile, he thinks, to bridge the chasm between his past and this strange, new present. He turns to her. He offers sincere words of thanks, and his determination grows stronger again from her unwavering support. He vows to do everything in his power to find the way home, starting with another conversation with the village elder. Soon he is standing at the elder's threshold, entering a quiet room filled with books. The old man looks up from his reading and greets the guest calmly and warmly. Tsurezure, firmly declaring that he will definitely set out on a journey to find the way back to his world, listens attentively. The young man admits his vulnerability. He says he is not yet accustomed to this strange land, and in just a few short days has already encountered so many deadly dangers. To his concern, the elder responds with a wise nod, assuring that he is a welcome guest and proposing a plan. Tsurezure must travel for a month to weigh all options, then return to the safety of the village. Looking at the horizon, he thinks, yes, a road is needed, but wandering unknown lands alone for someone like Tsurezure, it is too dangerous. To avert this danger, he calls Gina and orders her to become Tsurejure's guardian on the road. The sudden order both the elf and the young man freeze in shock, everything decided so quickly. She immediately accepts the task with boundless energy, even suggesting to set off right now. However, Stara is worried whether she has recovered enough from the previous wounds. Ignoring any pain still lingering, the warrior rushed to prepare for departure the next morning, leaving Shigura alone with her thoughts about whether he should worry about her too passionate zeal and formidable strength. Disappearing from sight, the elder watches her with a heavy gaze. Although he has already shared everything he knows about her past, the girl tragically still does not suspect her true nature. With a heavy heart, he looked outside and understood. Keeping a young woman named Gina locked up within the narrow confines of this small village means doing her harm. The old man understood. Although she knew she was an elf and therefore different from those around her, mere days were not enough. She needed to live through the difference in lifespan, in valuation, to feel how much her kin physically and magically surpassed others. Watching her bright, hopeful smile as she glanced toward Tsurezure, he felt that somewhere deep inside she subconsciously wanted to find out what was hidden beyond the forest. Looking at the young man, The older woman noted how well Tsurezure seemed to understand Hirvan from their first meeting and then formally asked him to allow her to accompany him for her own growth. He accepted responsibility with an even gaze and simply said that he understands the weight of the request. Finally, the day of departure arrived. The whole community gathered near the strange metal wagon to say goodbye under the clear, open sky. The peasants pressed baskets of food and supplies into his hands. Their faces shone with warmth and good wishes for the road ahead. Preparing to set off for the great city of Ludi, the bustling center, the elder had advised. He glanced at the map, mixing determination with doubt. Would they really manage to find the way? He stands among the peasant's face burning while they jokingly question him about amorous matters, whether he has a wife or a lover waiting somewhere. Thanks to his recent exploits, he shared Deke meat, saved young Arena, and came to Ginny's aid twice. His authority among men rose to unprecedented heights, and they are by no means shy about singing his praises. Understanding that they are hinting for him to marry into the family in the village, he feels this thought like a physical blow, and the men snap in irritation because he seemingly does not see how Gina feels. While the conversation continues, she approaches the group, curious about their quiet talk. The men quickly change the subject and note that a lunar journey usually brings great anxiety. At that moment, two people began loading their supplies into the vehicle's trunk. Their excitement was immediately felt, and the white owlet fluttered nearby, impatiently waiting for the journey to begin. He returns to his companion and asks if she is finally ready to set off, and she responds with a bright and decisive nod. Despite her enthusiasm, a shadow of hesitation crosses her face, and she admits that the thought of being away from her home for a whole month is slowly starting to give her a feeling of loneliness. In response, he pulls out a strange device with a long handle attached to a glowing screen and explains that it is for a commemorative photo, asking everyone to gather once more by the village gate one last time. He caught the moment the digital screen showed the entire village gathered together in one perfect image. He shows the device to his comrades. He sees their eyes widen in disbelief. Gina is sure he is some kind of sorcerer, and the men wonder how it is possible to create a portrait in an instantan to see their own faces whenever they want. When the farewells ended, the heavy car engine growled dully, starting up and vibrating against the dryer. When the van begins to drive away, Gina peeks out the window, energetically waves her hand, and shouts farewell to everyone, the last words to the crowd of villagers who watched them as they drove off. He looks at the horizon, and a quiet smile is on his lips, while the amazing, beautiful landscape of this world with soaring peaks and bright sun rolls past him. The journey officially started. The white Vanus was descending alone and rolling evenly through the endless, wild, and uneven space. Settling into the driver's seat, he decides it's time to enter their address into the navigator, recalling the place the villagers described. But as soon as the map calculates the route, his face pales. He grabs his head and freezes in shocked disbelief, while Gina remains looking at him confused, trying to understand what could have caused such a sudden blow. The camper van stands quietly in the wild area, and the digital display flashes and begins to flicker. It becomes visible that 2 holding points have been accumulated. A list of various maintenance and supply functions appears on the interface, showing the current operational status of the vehicle. In the cabin, he examines the instrument panel, notices the odometer shows 708 kilometers. He studies a separate screen. The machine is still at level 1, and more than 600 kilometers remain to the next milestone. And he thinks about what exact conditions are needed to earn more points. His confusion only deepens as he cross-checks the readings. Despite the trip meter showing 700 kilometers traveled, progress to the next level has advanced only halfway through that distance. He encounters a discrepancy, unable to understand why the system does not reflect their full journey. Noticing that the elven warrior was lost in thought, she moves closer and asks if the spell he previously used to help the little owl grow was specific. He confirms her guess and admits that the whole process has a mystical nature. He sighs, admitting that he still does not understand how to properly handle these abilities, and that forcing growth feels like constantly fighting with himself. She utters a soothing word, hinting that there is no need to rush the process. She smiles warmly and reminds him that the fluffy creature is a valuable companion who needs careful care. Her words hit the mark. He suddenly realizes that until now he had not truly accepted the owl as a real partner. Then he turns on the auto repair to patch up wear after their recent travels and wonders if the vehicle's condition will improve by morning. A heavy basket full of fresh bread and vegetables fell to the floor, and he immediately guessed that it was finally time to eat. She agreed without hesitation. Her appetite was sparked by the sight of the supplies. Stand by the van, he thoughtfully considers the generosity of the people they left behind. The village head provided plenty of food and even returned silver coins as change for the medicine they brought. She nods in agreement. Both are touched by the unexpected kindness of the villagers. He stands outside the camper van unpacking their supplies for dinner. When Gina offers to help start the fire, he reassures her the vehicle's internal systems will handle the heat. He suggests dividing the work. Gina prepares the vegetables for the soup, and he focuses on the main components. In a row on a wooden board lie 2 loaves of dark rye bread ready for use. The crust is thick, coarse, rustic. Looking at the bread, he notices its dense, heavy texture and slightly sour taste, which makes eating it plain not very pleasant. He recalls how in the village they softened it in rich meat broths or piled it high with various toppings, and inspired, he decides to experiment a bit with cooking to save their dinner. He starts by very carefully cutting the bread into even cubes. Heating the pan and melting the butter, he throws the cubes inside, seasoning them with a pinch of what he considers a magical powder, a universal seasoning from his world that adds juicy depth of flavor. While he works, she approaches with a bowl full of freshly finely chopped vegetables and asks if the portions are enough. He thumbs up approvingly, confirms everything is perfect, and orders her to pour them into the cauldron simmering on low heat. Vegetables are left to simmer in the fragrant broth until they become tender. When the soup is ready, it is poured into bowls, and golden bread cubes fried in butter are carefully placed on top as the finishing touch. The result is a hot, hearty bowl of vegetable soup. Harkem village. The croutons soak up the rich broth. They settle at a small table right outside near the van to enjoy the fruits of their labor. As soon as she takes the first bite, the warmth and taste of the food give a moment of long-awaited comfort on their journey. She freezes, eyes wide open, her pupils dilated as the complex flavors of the dish dance across her palate for the first time. This delight arises from the incredible combination of Harkem village bread and soup. It seems so rich to her, like a festive banquet. Tsurezure agrees. The vegetables from Marina's village are exceptionally sweet and fragrant, making the dish truly special. From the very quality of the dish, she feels a little embarrassed, and she admits that her own culinary skills are not comparable at all. Because of this, she is almost afraid to try it. But Tsurezure, it seems, is even surprised by his own success. He wonders if he is really able to cook such delicious food every time they eat. He explains that his motivation appears thanks to her presence. If he were alone, simple instant noodles would be enough for him, but when there is someone to share the meal with, he begins to be more creative. It is this mention of cup noodles that stirs a new curiosity in her. She has never heard of such a strange idea. She cannot help but giggle at his modesty. Nearby, a small white owl is completely absorbed in its portion. Its fluffy body almost overflows the edge of the bowl as it greedily eats. While they sit together outside the camper, Tsurezure explains that the seasonings he used are real kitchen tools created to make food more pleasant. She listens intently, impressed by how much thought and care he puts into their daily survival. A warm, sincere smile spreads across her face, and her eyes close in pure satisfaction as she realizes how lucky she is to share these moments. Looking at her happiness, he feels deep contentment, and all the day's hustle finally feels justified. Laughter echoes in the silence of the wild forest as the day begins to fade, and Tsurezure decides they will camp right here where they stand. Even when the conversation dies down, the little owl does not take its eyes off the bowl, finishing its soup to the last drop under the dark sky. She watched as Gina announced her intention to go down to the river and wash. Tsurezure quickly interrupted her, warning, "The sun is setting, the night air will be too cold, and monsters might be hiding in the darkness." After that, he introduced her to a completely unfamiliar concept, a shower that stands right inside the safe space of the camper. He led her inside to explain the strange devices. He showed a bottle and said it was special body soap that creates thick, cleansing foam. Gina looked around with wide-open eyes, trying to reconcile these modern luxuries with her impressions of the wilderness. Continuing the tour, he showed shampoo, explaining its specific purpose for hair, and handed her a clean towel. Politely nodding, he asked her to call if any difficulties arose, and he stepped outside to give her the needed privacy. In the cramped shop, mechanical levers turned, and from the perforated metal head, a steady stream of water splashed out. Outside, he calmly leaned against the car. A small white owl sat nearby, and he kept thinking about how casually he himself had suggested the shower, and whether Gina might have been too vulnerable. Meanwhile, inside, the elf girl was delighted. It seemed she felt a real rain of hot water. She stood under the waterfall of the stream, allowing the warmth to soak into her skin and wash away the dirt of the road. Steam rose around her as soon as she closed her eyes, and she completely immersed herself in a rare moment of absolute calm. Turning outside, he quietly laughed to himself and realized that Gina would probably handle any threat that might occur. Switching to the fluffy companion, he jokingly asked if the creature also wanted a turn in the shower. A soft, curious purr was heard in response. The little white owl flinches as the bathroom door flies open with a bang. Gina jumps out soaking wet, panicked and crying, shouting to Tsurezure that the hot and cold water suddenly disappeared, and she fears something terrible has happened to the camp's internal systems. Her sudden appearance interrupts his movements. He freezes, eyes wide open, when he sees the elf soaked like a witch. Gina, still overwhelmed by panic, only now begins to realize the indecency of her state. Her face flushes with a blush, and the pause between them stretches like eternity. He sharply looks away. A deep crimson crawls up his neck as he stubbornly stares at the wall, sweat drops appearing on his forehead. Behind his back, it finally sinks in how vulnerable she is. The sharp shock of water loss is replaced by growing, suppressed shame. A chaotic symphony of screams erupts as he frantically shields his eyes and feverishly insists he saw nothing while she fusses searching for shelter. Even the little white owlet seems to draw out the whirlpool of their mutual embarrassment. Its wings flutter, and the tension in the cramped space reaches a fever pitch. As the first panic subsides, he goes outside and exhausted sighs, explaining that the water tank simply ran dry. He assures her, the camper is not broken and the supply will be restored by morning, but his words hardly soothe the awkwardness still hanging in the air. While the moon hangs over the quiet landscape, she remains hidden inside, lamenting her own, in her opinion, clumsiness and apologizing to her mother for the scandalous turn of events. Outside, he gently nudges her to pull herself together, properly dry off, and get dressed before they talk about anything else. The night air settles on the chopped, uneven terrain, and the distant mountain silhouettes against the sky hide behind soft, drifting clouds. The world is indifferent to the minor drama unfolding inside the metal walls of the strange trailer. She looks up at the van's roof and notes with relief. The repairs are finished, and the new features work as intended. Exhaling quietly, he calls her again, curious if she has finally managed to pull herself together. He sat behind the wheel, a heavy guilt frozen on his face as he sincerely apologized for the lack of water. He admitted that he had completely forgotten about the tank's limited capacity while she remained silent, and without turning to him, looked out the window. While turning his thoughts over in his head, it dawned on him he had been careless. He used too much water on everyday things, cooking and washing dishes. He hadn't even thought that she would need a considerable amount for her long hair. Foolishly, he decided the supply was unlimited just because it was replenished every night. The weight of her shame seemed to crush her spirit, and she, slumping forward, muttered that she might completely give up the idea of marriage. Seeing her so despondent, he urged her to stop these talks, warning that her current state of mind was becoming dangerous. Then he tried to lift her spirits. He insisted that she had a wonderful character and was already quite beautiful. He even predicted that when she became even more attractive, men would undoubtedly line up to ask for her hand. She paused for a moment, her face half hidden, as she pondered his words and quietly asked if he truly believed what he was saying. He did not hesitate, once again confirming that other men would definitely not leave someone like her alone. His words seemed to hit right in the heart, and she froze for a moment, lost in thought. Stretching upward to touch her hair, she gently reminded him of their previous conversation where she said she had no family left. Left alone with the silence in the living quarters, she explained. After her mother's death, she lived alone, thinking of no one else. And she realized that her recent behavior was most likely simply because she was not used to sharing her space with another person. She listened as Tsurezure gently asked if she had truly found peace in her long solitude, and genuine anxiety was felt in his voice. In response, she admitted that her time with him and the little white owl was truly pleasant. So he suggested that this journey become a gradual way for her to get used to the presence of others again. She barely touched a soft, sincere smile on her lips as she quietly agreed. The heaviness of her past loneliness seemed to retreat for a moment in the warmth of this moment. When the conversation died down, a heavy truck rumbled along the winding mountain road and finally turned the corner, revealing a new destination on the horizon. Spread out in the valley below lay the walled city of February. The stone fortifications rose high and looked unshakable against the backdrop of endless open spaces. Seeing the huge walls, she looked in awe at their scale. And Tsurezure, noticing the excitement among the travelers nearby, decided to hide the unusual carriage and continue on foot to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Soon they reached the bustling entrance to the city, where guards kept watch over the steady stream of merchants and travelers passing through arched stone gateway. But their attempt to blend into the crowd was immediately thwarted. Passers-by, seeing a rare forest owl, began whispering in admiration. Feeling increasingly watchful gazes, Tsurezure urgently whispered for the creature to hide in her hood, and it accepted the request without hesitation. She walks beside Tsurezure through the bright, crowded streets of February, and only now does the full power of the city reveal itself. The architecture is magnificent. Stone buildings and towers rise above the noisy market, and prosperity and order prevail around. As they make their way through the crowd, Tsurezure stretches his gaze and comments on the incredible diversity of people here. He compares, in Odorio he never had the chance to see such a number of different races. Gina nods, her eyes scan the people, and she adds, even for her there is too much new here and everything sharply contrasts from burly dwarves to bustling merchants, all of which only intensifies the oppressive energy of the city. The quiet observation is broken by a sudden commotion nearby. A merchant aggressively kicks the customer's goods aside, pushing them away. Tsurezure watches silently and tension grows on his face as he realizes the coin offered was deemed insufficient. In response, a rude, public refusal causing the customer to fumble confusedly. He turns at the sound of another quarrel. A seller roars fiercely, demanding that the other leave, insisting there is no food for people like them. The air thickens with open hostility, a sharp contrast to the lavish grandeur of the city they had just admired. The target of the merchant's wrath is a lion-like beastfolk. He is pushed onto the cobblestones with a heavy thud. Gina explains to Tsurezure through the tangled confusion of his surprise that these people come from different tribal beastkin, wolves, birds, sea dwellers, and although their roots differ, they are often lumped together and universally harassed with open contempt in such places. They continue on their way, but the mood changes when Tsurezure asks why beastfolk are treated with such disdain. Gina admits she has not heard of such blatant discrimination as a common widespread practice, suggesting it might be a very specific, nasty cultural trait of this particular region, which they have just uncovered. He contemplates the complexities of this great city and realizes, despite advanced information and transport networks, deeply rooted prejudices still flourish. It feels like a completely different world compared to the stories he has heard, and he is troubled by the harsh reality hidden behind the impressive walls of February. Their sad silence is broken suddenly. A finely dressed man in glasses approaches from behind. He politely asks if they are visitors and if they are looking for something specific. His professional restraint and calm voice sharply contrast with the chaotic, hostile energy of the street. He greets them warmly, hinting that if they are looking for places, February Falls is a must-see. He offers his services to arrange a guide for their journey. Hearing this, Gina's face lights up with pure delight. She has long dreamed of seeing the legendary waterfalls. Tsurezure watches her, noticing the man's words that he works in the local tourist information service. Noticing their interest, the man gestures for them to follow him and suggests moving to the information desk to discuss the trip details in a calmer setting. Soon they reach a well-kept house. Inside it is clean and orderly. It serves as a hub for travelers seeking direction in the bustling city. When everything quiets down, the agent lays out the truth about the walk. The waterfalls are a 5-hour trek from the city gates. He emphasizes that the path is dangerous. It winds through lands full of monsters, so professional guard accompaniment is necessary. The mention of a 5-hour journey momentarily throws Tsurezure off track, but the agent quickly reassures him. He promises to get an experienced guide who will ensure their safety, then asks them to wait a moment. While they wait, a burly warrior with a heavy sword strapped to his belt passes by the office walking confidently. His presence, a silent proof of the threats lurking beyond the city walls. But the agent returns with a tense face and says their list of guides is empty because someone did not return last week. Tsurezure reflects on the cruelty of this world's culture, while Gina confidently states that she is fully capable of providing her own protection. He listens as the agent, profusely apologizing, explains that all certified guides have already been sent out. The man tentatively offers an apprentice as a replacement and insists that despite the lack of experience, the person is fully capable of safely leading the way to the counterfeit. Skepticism appears on his face as he repeats the word apprentice again and again, doubting the wisdom of such an arrangement for a dangerous journey. Sensing hesitation, the agent instantly bows, clasping his palms in one hand and promising a significant discount to sweeten the deal. Without waiting for the conclusion, the man abruptly turns and shouts a threatening order, "Cultipier immediately." Behind the counter, a small, frightened figure begins to emerge from the shadows of the storeroom. Her steps are light and never stop. The apprentice steps forward and becomes visible, a young beast girl with fox ears and a fluffy tail. The air suddenly chills in the room as the travelers realize she is held on a leash tightly fastened loop around her neck, and her gaze lowered, only sadness in her eyes. Stunned by the heavy silence, both he and Gina look at the child. Their faces shift from confusion to pure, unmistakable horror. The cold truth of what is happening and the blatant cruelty before them leave them speechless.